The rifle fell silent. Jack Sullivan stood at the 1,000-yard line of his private range, staring through the scope at a target he could no longer hit. The Montana morning stretched cold and crystalline around him, the kind of dawn that used to make his hands steady as stone. Now those same hands trembled against the stock of his M40A1, the Marine Corps sniper rifle that had once been an extension of his very soul. The sun broke over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of copper and gold. Jack was 76 years old. The rifle was 53. One of them was dying. He squeezed the trigger anyway. The shot cracked across the valley, echoing off distant ridgelines where he had once taught young Marines to read wind and calculate bullet drop. Through the scope, he watched the impact point materialize 6 inches left of center. A miss, the kind of miss that would have gotten men killed in combat, the kind of miss that got his best friend killed in 1971. Jack worked the bolt, ejecting the spent brass. It tumbled through the air, catching sunlight, landing in the frost beside 4 other casings. 5 shots, 5 misses. His hands shook worse with each trigger pull, the tremor creeping up his forearms like a slow poison. He threw the rifle down. The M40A1 clattered against the shooting bench, and Jack turned away from the range, breathing hard. His breath came out in clouds. 76 years old, and his body was betraying him, one nerve cell at a time. Parkinson's disease. Early onset, the doctors had said, though there was nothing early about being 76. The neurologist had used words like progressive and irreversible, but Jack had stopped listening after the first 5 minutes. He knew what dying looked like. He had seen it up close in the war, had held dying men in his arms and felt their last breaths against his face. This was different. This was slower. This was crueler. Jack picked up the rifle with both hands, cradling it like a wounded child. The wood stock was worn smooth from decades of use. The metal blued and reblued so many times it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This rifle had been with him in the Central Highlands, at Khe Sanh, at a dozen fire-base perimeters where the night erupted in green tracers and rocket fire. It had been with him when he put a bullet through an enemy officer's skull at 900 yards, saving a platoon that did not even know they were being saved. It had been with him on Hill 881 South when everything went to hell. The memory hit him like it always did, sudden and total. 1971, the red clay earth, the morning heat already oppressive at 0600. His spotter, Corporal Mike Rodriguez, everyone called him Rabbit because he was quick and scared of nothing, lying beside him in the hide. The enemy officer in his scope, the radio call to Lieutenant Raymond Hayes. Permission to engage. The answer that should have been yes, but was not. Hold fire, Sullivan, I'm negotiating. Negotiating with the enemy, while Marines dug fighting positions below, trusting their lieutenant to keep them alive. Jack had held fire. He followed orders. He was 23 years old and he believed in the chain of command. 30 minutes later, the attack came from 3 sides. 12 Marines died in the first 60 seconds. Rabbit died calling for a medic, his voice getting smaller and smaller until it was just breath, and then not even that. Jack had survived. He always survived. That was his curse. He carried the M40A1 back to the ranch house, a log structure he had built with his own hands 30 years ago when he retired from the Marine Corps. The house sat alone on 200 acres of Montana wilderness, far enough from town that he could shoot at any hour without bothering neighbors, close enough that he could still get his medications when he needed them. Inside, the house was spare and clean. A kitchen with cast iron pans hanging from hooks. A living room with a wood stove and a leather chair worn to the shape of his body, and on every wall, photographs. Jack in dress blues, 1967, fresh out of boot camp with a face that still believed the world made sense. Jack at Quantico, 1975, now an instructor, teaching scout sniper school to young Marines who looked at him with something between fear and reverence. Jack with his wife Margaret on their wedding day, 1978, her smile bright enough to chase away every ghost he carried. Jack with his son Kevin, age 12, holding his first rifle, looking up at his father like he hung the moon. There were no recent photos of Kevin. Kevin was 42 now, living in Seattle, and they had not spoken in 10 years. The Iraq War had done that. Kevin protesting, Jack defending. Words said that could not be unsaid. Doors closed that would not reopen. Margaret's photo was the largest. She had died 5 years ago, cancer taking her in 6 brutal months. Jack had held her hand at the end, useless, unable to save her, unable to do anything but watch. He was good at watching. It was what snipers did. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Jack crossed to the kitchen counter and picked it up, already knowing who it would be. Ben Morrison's voice came through, rough as gravel. "You see the flyer?" Jack leaned against the counter. "What flyer?" "Montana State Precision Rifle Championship. 2 months out, $50,000 prize." Jack said nothing. "Hayes is sponsoring it," Ben continued. "Raymond Hayes. He's going to be there as honored guest, giving some speech about his heroic service." Jack's hand tightened in the phone. The tremor got worse when he was angry. 50 years, he said. 50 years, and that bastard is still lying. Ben was silent for a moment. "Jack, we've been over this. You have no proof about Hill 881. "I was there. I saw it." "You saw Hayes talking on the radio. You don't know what he was saying. You don't know what orders he had from higher up." Jack closed his eyes. He could see it so clearly, even now. The enemy officer in his scope, talking to someone off to the side. Hayes on the radio, his voice calm, almost friendly. The way the enemy had known exactly where to hit, exactly when, like someone had given them a detailed map. "I know what I saw," Jack said. "Even if you're right, what are you going to do? You can't compete anymore. Your hands shake too bad." Jack looked at his hands. The tremor was constant now, a fine vibration that made holding a coffee cup an exercise in concentration. "I'll figure something out." Jack let it go. "Hayes is 82 years old. What's the point?" "The point is those 12 Marines. The point is Rabbit. The point is Hayes is writing a memoir, and he's going to lie about all of it. And in 10 years, everyone who knows the truth will be dead." Ben sighed. "Come into town. Let's talk about this in person. I'll be there in an hour." Jack hung up and stood in his kitchen, surrounded by ghosts. The house was too quiet. It had been too quiet since Margaret died. Sometimes he could still hear her moving through the rooms, humming while she cooked, laughing at something on the television. Sometimes he woke in the middle of the night and reached for her before remembering. He wondered if Rabbit's mother still remembered her son's voice. If any of those 12 Marines had people who still said their names out loud. Jack put on his coat and drove into town. Morrison's gun shop sat on the main street of a town that barely qualified as a town. 3,000 people, one stoplight, more churches than bars, but not by much. Ben had owned the shop for 40 years, ever since he got out of the Navy. SEAL Team 2, combat deployments, he never talked about, but carried in the set of his shoulders. Ben was behind the counter when Jack walked in, reading a magazine about long-range shooting. He looked up, and his expression shifted from friendly to concerned in half a second. "You look like hell," Ben said. "Feel worse." Ben came around the counter. They were the same age, both over 70, old enough to remember a different America, but not old enough to be ready for the one that was coming. Ben moved like he always had, smooth and deliberate, while Jack felt every year in his joints. "Coffee?" Ben asked. "Whiskey. It's 9 in the morning. Your point?" Ben poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass and slid it across the counter. Jack drank it in one swallow, feeling the burn chase away some of the cold that had settled into his bones. "Tell me about the competition," Jack said. Ben handed him a flyer. Full color, professional printing. "Montana State Precision Rifle Championship," it read. "Open to all shooters. Categories from 300 yards to 1,000. Top prize $50,000. And at the bottom, in smaller print, sponsored by the Raymond Hayes Foundation for American Heroes. Jack's jaw tightened. American heroes. The man who let 12 Marines die so he could negotiate the release of 3 POWs and get himself a Silver Star. "He's going to give the keynote speech," Ben said. "Talk about duty and honor and sacrifice. Press will be there. Television cameras." Jack set the flyer down. "I need to be there." "Jack, you can barely hold a rifle steady." "I'll find a way." "How? You going to magic away the Parkinsons?" Jack looked at his friend. Ben had pulled him out of a burning Humvee in Hughes City in 1968, had carried him 300 yards while taking fire from 2 directions, had saved his life, and never once mentioned it again, because that was what brothers did. They saved each other, and they did not keep score. "I'll find someone to shoot for me," Jack said. "I'll coach them." "That's not how competitions work." "I know, but Hayes will be there. Media will be there. If I can get proof, if I can expose what he did, it doesn't matter if I win the competition. I just need the platform." Ben studied him for a long moment. "What proof?" "You've been looking for 50 years. Jack did not have an answer for that. The bell above the shop door chimed, and a young man walked in. Late 20s, athletic build, wearing work clothes stained with concrete dust. Dark hair, tired eyes, the kind of tiredness that came from the inside. He moved to the ammunition shelf without looking at either of them. Ben leaned close to Jack and lowered his voice. That's Danny Chen, Catherine Chen's son. Jack looked at the young man more carefully. Catherine Chen. The name pulled up memories. A Marine Corps instructor at Quantico in the 90s. One of the few women teaching Scout sniper school. Tough as woodpecker lips and twice as mean when she needed to be. She had died 3 years ago, cancer, and Jack had sent flowers to the funeral even though he had not seen her in 20 years. I didn't know she had a son, Jack said. Army Ranger, Afghanistan, came back about 6 months ago. Been working construction, staying to himself. Word is he's got PTSD pretty bad. Jack watched Danny select a box of ammunition, his hands shaking as he reached for his wallet. The young man's eyes had that hollowed-out look Jack recognized. He had seen it in mirrors often enough. Danny paid and turned to leave. Ben called out, "You take care now, son." Danny nodded without speaking and pushed through the door. Jack stood. "I need to talk to him." Ben grabbed his arm. "Jack, leave the kid alone. He's got enough problems." "So do I, and maybe we can help each other." That evening, Jack found Danny Chen at the only bar in town worth finding. It was called The Stirrup, and it smelled like stale beer and broken dreams. Danny sat alone at the end of the bar, working through a whiskey that was not his first. Jack slid onto the stool beside him. Danny did not look up. "You don't know me," Jack said, "but I knew your mother." Danny's jaw tightened. He took another drink. "Good for you." Catherine Chen, best instructor I ever worked with at Quantico. She taught me things about fieldcraft I'm still using today. She's dead. I know, I'm sorry. Danny turned to look at him for the first time. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from drink or grief or both. "What do you want, old man?" "Buy you a drink, talk. I don't need a therapy session. Not offering one, just offering whiskey." Danny turned back to his glass. The bartender, a woman in her 50s who had probably heard every sad story this town could produce, raised an eyebrow at Jack. He held up 2 fingers. She poured. Jack let the silence stretch. It was a technique he had learned as a sniper. Silence made people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable people talked. Finally, Danny said, "You're Jack Sullivan." Jack was surprised. "You know me? My mother talked about you. Said you were the best shooter she ever saw. Said you could put a bullet through a keyhole at 1,000 yards. Your mother was generous with her praise. She didn't lie. They drank. The whiskey was cheap, but it did the job." "You shoot?" Jack asked. Danny's expression went dark. "Used to." "Why'd you stop?" "Because the last time I pulled a trigger, my best friend died." Jack understood that sentence in ways Danny probably did not realize. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, everyone's sorry. Doesn't bring him back." "No," Jack said. "It doesn't." They sat in silence again. The bar was nearly empty, just a couple of locals playing pool in the back and a trucker eating a burger at a corner table. The television above the bar showed a baseball game neither of them watched. "What happened?" Jack asked. Danny's hands tightened around his glass. "Afghanistan, 2018. We were providing overwatch for a convoy. I was the shooter. Tommy Nguyen was my spotter. My best friend since basic. We got a call for fire support. Enemy position, 800 yards. I calculated the distance, the wind, everything. I took the shot. And I was wrong. I miscalculated. Called the wrong coordinates to air support. They hit our position instead of the enemy's. Tommy died instantly. I didn't get a scratch." Jack felt the weight of that. He knew it intimately. The guilt of surviving when better men died. The constant question of why. The certainty that you did not deserve to still be breathing. "That wasn't your fault," Jack said. "Yes, it was. I made the call. I pulled the trigger. It's exactly my fault." "You made a mistake under fire. That's different than fault." Danny laughed, bitter and sharp. "Tell that to Tommy's wife. Tell that to his kid who's growing up without a father." Jack wanted to say something about how war was chaos, how mistakes happen, how Tommy knew the risks. But he had said those words to himself 10,000 times, and they had never made anything better. Instead, he said, "I had a spotter too, Mike Rodriguez. Everyone called him Rabbit. He died because I followed an order I shouldn't have followed. I think about him every day, every single day." Danny looked at him. "Does it get better?" "No, but you learn to carry it. You learn to wake up anyway." They drank in silence. After a while, Jack said, "I need your help." Danny almost laughed. "Help with what?" "There's a shooting competition in 2 months. Montana State Championship. I need to enter it, but I can't shoot anymore. Parkinson's disease. My hands shake too bad. I need someone to shoot for me." "That's not how competitions work." "I know, but I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to expose someone. A man who got 12 Marines killed and has been lying about it for 50 years. He's sponsoring the event. Media will be there. I need a platform. Find someone else. I'm asking you. Danny shook his head. I don't shoot anymore. I told you that. Your mother wouldn't want you to give up. Danny's eyes flashed with anger. Don't talk about my mother. You didn't know her. Not really. You're right, Jack said. But I know guilt. I know what it's like to carry ghosts. Shooting won't erase them. But maybe it'll help you face them. Danny stood up. He threw money on the bar. I'm not interested. He walked out into the Montana night. Jack sat alone at the bar, his hands shaking around an empty glass. The bartender poured him another drink without being asked. Give him time, she said. Lost boys always come back eventually. Jack was not sure he believed that, but he nodded anyway. He drove home through darkness, so complete it felt like driving through the void. The Bitterroot Mountains rose black against a sky full of stars. Somewhere out there, Rabbit was still 20 years old, still laughing about a girl back home, still alive in Jack's memory, if nowhere else. Somewhere out there, 12 Marines were still digging fighting positions, still trusting their lieutenant, still believing they would see the next sunrise. Somewhere out there, Raymond Hayes was still making a deal that would kill them all. Jack parked in front of his dark house and sat in the truck, engine ticking as it cooled. His hands shook against the steering wheel. The tremor was worse at night, worse when he was tired, worse when he thought too much about things he could not change. Inside, he did not turn on the lights. He moved through the house by memory, pouring another whiskey, sitting in the leather chair by the coldwood stove. Margaret's photo watched him from across the room. She had known about Hill 881. She had held him through the nightmares, the ones where he was back in that hide, watching through the scope as Marines died one by one. You have to let it go, she had said, year after year. You have to forgive yourself. But Jack knew there was a difference between what you had to do and what you could do. He fell asleep in the chair, glass in hand, and dreamed of red clay and green jungle and a young man named Rabbit who would never grow old. 3 days passed. Jack trained alone on his range, trying to force his body to obey. He worked through exercises the physical therapist had given him, stretching and strengthening, fighting the Parkinson's 1 minute at a time. He took his medications. He ate properly. He did everything the doctor said. His hands still shook. On the 4th day, there was a knock at his door. Jack opened it to find Danny Chen standing on his porch, looking like he had not slept in a week. I can't promise anything, Danny said, but I'll try. Jack stepped aside. Danny walked in. They sat at Jack's kitchen table, and Jack spread out the competition rules. Danny read through them, his expression skeptical. You understand this is crazy, right? Danny said. I haven't shot competitively in 5 years. I can barely hold a rifle without having a panic attack. And you want me to compete at the state level? I'll coach you. Every day. I'll teach you everything I know. Why? Why does this matter so much? Jack pulled out a folder. Inside were yellowed after action reports, faded photographs, newspaper clippings. The official record of Hill 881 South. He spread them across the table. This is what the Marine Corps says happened. Surprise attack. Overwhelming enemy force. Heroic defense. Lieutenant Raymond Hayes negotiated the release of 3 POWs a week later, earned a Silver Star. And what really happened? Jack tapped one of the reports. I was the sniper providing overwatch. 45 minutes before the attack, I had an enemy officer in my scope. High-value target. I radioed Hayes for permission to engage. He told me to hold fire. He said he was negotiating. Negotiating what? That's what I've been trying to figure out for 50 years, but whatever it was, he delayed my warning. When the attack came, our guys weren't ready. 12 dead in the first minute. My spotter was one of them. Danny studied the documents. You have proof? Not yet, but I'm working on it. And when I get it, I need a way to make people pay attention. Hayes is going to be at this competition, giving speeches, playing the hero. If I can expose him there with media watching, maybe people will finally listen. This is about revenge. Jack shook his head. This is about justice. Those 12 Marines deserve to have the truth told. Rabbit deserves it. Danny was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, if I do this, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing it for your vendetta. I'm doing it because maybe it'll help me figure out how to pick up a rifle again without seeing Tommy's face. Fair enough. And if I can't do it, if the PTSD gets too bad, I'm out. No guilt trip, no pressure. Agreed. Danny stood. When do we start? Tomorrow. Sunrise. They shook hands. Danny's grip was firm, the kind of handshake that meant something. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your spotter," Danny said. "Rabbit, what was he like?" Jack smiled, the first real smile in a long time. He was quick and fearless, and he made terrible jokes. He wanted to be a teacher when he got home. 4th grade. He said kids that age still believed in heroes. Danny nodded. Tommy wanted to be a firefighter. He said saving lives was better than taking them. "Maybe they're both watching," Jack said, "making sure we get this right." Danny left without answering. Jack stood at his window, watching the young man drive away into the Montana twilight. His hands shook, but for the first time in months, it felt like something other than disease. It felt like anticipation. 2 weeks into training, and Danny was struggling. They worked every morning at Jack's range, starting at dawn when the air was still and cold. Jack could not demonstrate anymore, so he coached with words, describing the perfect position, the ideal trigger pull, the way breath and heartbeat and muscle memory had to align. Danny tried. He really tried. But every time he settled behind the rifle, every time his finger touched the trigger, Jack could see the tension building in his shoulders. The young man's breath would get shallow. His hands would shake, and not from Parkinson's. At the 300-yard line, Danny fired 5 shots. Only 2 hit the target. The others sailed wide, erratic, the kind of misses that came from a mind somewhere else. Jack called a halt. Danny stood up, face flushed with frustration. "I can't do this," Danny said. "I thought I could, but I can't." Jack walked over, moving carefully on ground that was uneven. "You're fighting the rifle. I'm trying to shoot it." "No, you're remembering. You're back in Afghanistan, not here." Danny turned away. "Maybe I should be. Maybe that's where I belong." Jack understood that sentiment. How many times had he wanted to go back, to redo that day, to take the shot Hayes told him not to take? How many times had he wanted to trade places with Rabbit? "Sit down," Jack said. Danny sat. Jack lowered himself onto the shooting bench, his joints protesting. "When I got back," Jack said, "I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back on Hill 881. I could hear the mortars, smell the blood, see Rabbit's face. It went on for months, years really. I was teaching at Quantico, training new snipers, and inside I was dying." "What changed?" "Margaret, my wife. She told me I had a choice. I could let the war kill me slowly, or I could find a way to live with it. She said the best way to honor the dead was to live well, to be the man they thought I was." Danny looked at him. "And did you? Live well?" "Some days. Other days I just survived. But I kept teaching. I passed on what I learned. I tried to make sure the next generation of Marines was better prepared than I was." That's what my mother said too, in her letters. She said carrying the dead was a privilege, not a burden. She said it meant we loved them enough to remember. "Your mother was a smart woman." Danny picked up his rifle, the Macmillan TAC-338 that Catherine had used in her final years of competition shooting. It was a beautiful weapon, custom built, worth more than most cars. "Tell me something," Danny said. "When you think about Rabbit, what do you see?" Jack closed his eyes. "I see him smiling. He smiled all the damn time, even when we were cold and wet and scared. He used to say that fear was just your body's way of telling you that you were alive." Tommy used to say something similar. He said every mission we survived was a gift. He never took it for granted. They sat in silence, 2 men separated by 40 years but connected by the same wounds. "Let's try again," Danny said. This time, when Danny settled behind the rifle, Jack talked him through it differently. "Don't think about the target," Jack said. "Think about Tommy. What would he want you to do?" Danny's breathing slowed. "You're not in Afghanistan. You're in Montana. You're safe. This is just a rifle and a target. No one dies if you miss. No one lives if you hit. It's just you proving to yourself that you're still a shooter." Danny's finger found the trigger. Breathe in. Hold. Let half out. Find that space between heartbeats where everything goes still. Danny fired. The shot echoed across the valley. Through the spotting scope, Jack saw the bullet impact. Center mass. 10 ring. "Again," Jack said. Danny worked the bolt, loaded another round, settled back in. This time he did not need coaching. He found his breath, found his stillness, fired. Another 10 ring. 4 more shots, all within a 6-inch group at 300 yards. Not perfect, but light years better than 20 minutes ago. When Danny stood up, his hands were steady. His face had lost some of that haunted look. "I felt it," he said. "For a second there, I felt like a shooter again." "You are a shooter. You just forgot for a while." They packed up the equipment and walked back to Jack's truck. The morning had warmed, and the mountains were sharp against a blue sky so deep it hurt to look at. Jack's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, saw Ben's name. "You need to come to the shop," Ben said. "There's someone here you need to meet." "Who?" "Hayes's granddaughter. She's asking questions about Hill 881. Jack's heart rate kicked up. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Danny. Change of plans. They drove into town, Jack's truck rattling over dirt roads that turned to pavement as they got closer to civilization. Danny did not ask questions, just stared out the window at the passing landscape. Morrison's gun shop was empty except for Ben and a young woman standing at the counter. She was in her mid-20s, dressed in jeans and a blazer, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Professional, determined, nervous. Ben made introductions. "Jack Sullivan, Danny Chen, this is Sarah Hayes." Jack studied her. She had Raymond Hayes' eyes, the same color, the same intensity, but where Hayes' eyes were cold and calculating, hers held something different, doubt, maybe even guilt. "Miss Hayes," Jack said carefully, "what brings you here?" Sarah pulled out a notebook. "I'm a journalist. I've been researching my grandfather's military service for a story. I found some inconsistencies in his records. About an engagement at Hill 881 South in 1971. Jack felt Danny tense beside him. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Sarah opened her notebook. "The official after-action report says the Marine position was surprised by an enemy attack. But I found radio logs that suggest a sniper. That would be you, Mr. Sullivan, called in a warning 45 minutes before the attack. The report says the warning came only 5 minutes before, which wouldn't give anyone time to prepare properly." Jack's hands shook. He shoved them in his pockets. "Where did you get those radio logs?" "That's not important. What's important is they contradict my grandfather's official report. I need to know why." "Why are you investigating your own grandfather?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Because I'm a journalist. Because the truth matters. Because I've spent my whole life listening to him talk about Hill 881, and something about his story never added up." "What does Hayes know about this?" "He doesn't. I told him I was doing a puff piece about his heroism. He believes it." Jack looked at Ben, then at Danny. This changed everything. If Sarah had access to radio logs, if she was willing to dig deeper, they might actually have a chance at proof. "Miss Hayes," Jack said, "I need you to understand something. Your grandfather is not the hero he pretends to be. He made a deal with the enemy that got 12 Marines killed. My best friend was one of them." Sarah did not look surprised. "I suspected something like that. But I need evidence. Real evidence. Do you have any?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it." "How?" Jack explained about the competition, about his plan to expose Hayes publicly. Sarah listened without interrupting, taking notes. When he finished, she said, "That's not enough. You need documentation. Witnesses. Something more than your word against his." "I know. That's why I need your help. You have access to records I don't. You can ask questions without raising suspicion." "And what do I get?" "The truth. Isn't that what journalists want?" Sarah closed her notebook. "My grandfather is 82 years old. He's the only family I have left. If I do this, if I help you destroy him, I lose everything. Or you gain your integrity." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "I'll help, but I need time. Those radio logs are just the beginning. I need to find more." "How much time?" "The competition is in 6 weeks. I can work fast, but I can't promise anything." 6 weeks, Jack said. "That's all we have." Sarah left, promising to stay in touch. When she was gone, Ben poured coffee for all three of them. "That girl's got guts," Ben said. "Going after her own family like that. Or she's setting us up," Danny said. "How do we know she's not reporting everything back to Hayes?" Jack had considered that. "We don't. But I saw something in her eyes. She wants the truth. People want a lot of things. Doesn't mean they'll do what's necessary to get them. We'll see." They drank their coffee. Outside, the town went about its business, unaware that in a gun shop on Main Street, 3 men and 1 woman were planning to rewrite history. Training continued. Every morning, dawn to noon, Jack pushing Danny harder each day. 600 yards. 800, the distances where precision shooting became an art form. Danny improved steadily. His groups tightened. His confidence grew. The rifle became familiar in his hands again. An old friend he had forgotten how to talk to. But Jack could see the calm. Some mornings, Danny showed up with dark circles under his eyes, looking like he had not slept. Some days his hands shook so badly that Jack called off training, knowing that forcing it would only make things worse. They did not talk about Tommy much. They did not talk about Rabbit. But both ghosts were always there, watching from the shadows. 4 weeks before the competition, Sarah called. I found something. Jack put her on speaker. Ben and Danny gathered around. There was a sergeant major named William Crawford, Sarah said. He was Hayes's radio man at Hill 881. He's still alive, living in Virginia. I contacted him. He agreed to meet. When? Tomorrow. I'm flying out tonight. Be careful. I will. And Mr. Sullivan? Crawford said something interesting when I talked to him on the phone. He said he's been waiting 50 years for someone to ask the right questions. Jack felt hope stir in his chest for the first time in decades. Sarah called back 3 days later. Her voice was different, harder, angry. I have it, she said. I have proof. What kind of proof? Crawford kept personal audio recordings. Against regulations, but he did it anyway. He said it was for his own protection, in case Hayes ever tried to blame him for something. Jack's heart pounded. And he has Hayes on tape, negotiating with an enemy officer through a translator. Hayes offered tactical intelligence about Marine positions in exchange for the release of 3 American POWs. Jack sat down hard. The room spun. Danny was beside him, immediately steadying him. It's clear as day, Sarah continued. Hayes says, and I quote, I'll delay the warning. Give you time to position your forces. 3 Americans for coordinates. That's the deal. Premeditated murder, Jack whispered. Crawford is willing to testify if needed. He's 80 years old and his health is failing, but he said he needs to do this before he dies, for his conscience. Can you get us a copy of that recording? Already done. I'm emailing it to you now. Jack's computer chimed. He opened the email with shaking hands, downloaded the audio file, hit play. Raymond Hayes' voice filled the room. Younger but unmistakable. Talking casually about trading American lives for political gain, laughing with the enemy, making jokes while 12 Marines dug their own graves. Jack had to leave the room. He made it to the porch before his legs gave out. He sat on the steps, head in his hands, and cried for the first time since Margaret died. Danny followed him out, sat beside him, said nothing. After a while, Jack said, I was right. All these years, I was right. Yeah, 50 years of people telling me I was wrong, that I was bitter, that I needed to let it go. You were never wrong. Rabbit died for nothing. They all died for nothing, so Hayes could be a hero. They died because war is full of evil men. You tried to save them. That matters. Jack looked at the younger man. Does it? It does to me. They sat in silence as the sun set over Montana, painting the mountains in shades of fire. 2 weeks before the competition, Jack's Parkinson's got worse. He woke one morning and could not grip a coffee cup. His hands trembled so violently that he knocked over a glass of water, trying to take his medication. Danny found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his useless hands. We need to get you to a doctor, Danny said. It won't help. This is just progression. The neurologist warned me. There has to be something they can do. There isn't. This is what dying looks like when it takes its time. Danny called Ben anyway. Together they got Jack to the clinic in town. The doctor examined him, adjusted his medications, told him what he already knew. The disease was accelerating. Stress was making it worse. He needed to rest. I'll rest when I'm dead, Jack said. That might be sooner than you think. They drove back to the ranch in silence. That evening, Ben stayed for dinner. They sat around Jack's table, eating steaks that Ben grilled because Jack's hands shook too badly to handle a knife. Jack, Ben said carefully, maybe you should sit this one out. Let Danny compete. Let Sarah handle the media. You don't need to be there. Yes, I do. Why, you have the proof now. Sarah can release it any time. Because I need to see Hayes' face when the truth comes out. I need to watch him realize that he didn't get away with it. That's the only thing that's kept me going for 50 years. And if you die before you see it, then I die, but I'll die trying. Ben shook his head but did not argue further. He knew Jack too well, knew that some men needed closure more than they needed breath. After Ben left, Danny helped Jack clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, a rhythm they had developed over weeks of training together. Can I ask you something? Danny said. Jack nodded. Do you ever regret it? Not taking the shot when you had the chance? Disobeying Hayes? Every day. Every single day. Even though it would have ended your career? I'd rather have ended my career than buried Rabbit. Danny was quiet for a moment. I think about that too. About Tommy. If I could go back, if I could change what happened, I'd give anything. My career, my life, anything. But you can't. Number. So what do you do with that? Jack looked at the young man. You carry it, and you try to make sure it means something. You honor them by being better than you were, by helping others not make the same mistakes. Is that what you're doing with me? Trying to make up for Rabbit? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a selfish old man who doesn't want to die alone. You're not alone. Neither are you. They finished cleaning in silence, and Danny left for his apartment in town. Jack stood at his window watching taillights disappear down the dirt road. His hand shook against the glass, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like the shaking might be worth something. 1 week before the competition, Sarah called with bad news. Hayes knows, she said without preamble. He knows I've been investigating. How? I don't know. But he confronted me this morning. At his house, he was angry, angrier than I've ever seen him. What did he say? He told me to drop it, for my own good. He said there were things about the war I didn't understand, classified things. And if I kept digging, I'd hurt myself and the family. Did he threaten you? Sarah's voice went quiet. He hit me, across the face, hard enough to leave a bruise. Jack felt rage boil up in his chest, hot and pure. Give me his address. No, that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I need you to know that I'm not backing down. He hit me, his own granddaughter, because he's scared. That means we're close. Sarah, be careful. Hayes has connections. He could hurt you. He already has. But I'm not a little girl anymore. I can handle myself. I'm serious. Men like Hayes don't fight fair. Neither do I. She hung up. Jack stared at the phone, then called Danny. We need to move faster, Jack said when Danny answered. Hayes knows we're coming for him. The next morning, Sarah showed up at Jack's ranch. She had a bruise on her left cheek, dark purple, the size of a man's hand. Danny saw it and his face went hard. That son of a bitch. Sarah touched the bruise gently. It's fine. I've had worse. No, Jack said, it's not fine. A man who hits a woman is a coward. Add it to the list of Hayes' crimes. They sat in Jack's kitchen, spreading out everything they had. Radio logs, Crawford's testimony, the audio recording, newspaper clippings about the POW release, photos of the 12 Marines who died. This is enough, Sarah said. We could go public right now. No, Jack said. We wait until the competition. Maximum impact, maximum attention. That's 6 days away. I know. Hayes could do something before then. He could destroy evidence. He could hurt someone. Then we make sure he can't. How? Jack looked at Danny. We put everything in multiple safe places. We send copies to journalists we trust. We make sure that if anything happens to any of us, the truth still comes out. Sarah made a list. She had contacts at 3 major newspapers and 2 television networks. By the end of the day, encrypted copies of everything were in the hands of people who knew how to use them. That night, Jack received an envelope. No return address. Inside were surveillance photos. Sarah leaving Crawford's house in Virginia. Danny at the shooting range. Jack himself walking to his truck. And a note typed on plain paper. Sullivan, drop the crusade or they pay. You know I have reach. RH. Jack showed the photos to the others. Sarah went pale. Danny's jaw clenched. He's threatening us, Sarah said. He's scared, Danny countered. Scared men make mistakes. Jack studied the photos. Professional quality. Taken with telephoto lenses. Hayes had hired someone to watch them, which meant he was taking this seriously, which meant they were winning. We don't back down, Jack said. We're too close. Ben arrived within the hour, bringing Marcus Webb with him. Marcus was 38, former Army Ranger, missing his left leg below the knee from an IED in Afghanistan. He used a prosthetic that he moved on like it was part of him. He was also one of the best competitive shooters in the state. Marcus looked at the photos. Hayes did this? Jack nodded. Then he's declared war, and I don't take kindly to people threatening my friends. You don't have to get involved, Jack said. Too late. I'm already involved. Catherine Chen saved my life after I lost my leg. She kept me from eating my gun. If her son is in danger because he's doing the right thing, I'm standing with him. Jack felt something shift in the room. They were not alone anymore. They were a team. Brothers. We finished this together, Jack said. Everyone nodded. 5 days before the competition, Jack collapsed. He was on the range with Danny, coaching a drill, when his legs simply stopped working. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the ground, unable to move. Danny called an ambulance. They took Jack to the hospital in Missoula, an hour away. Tests, scans, doctors conferring in hushed tones. The neurologist explained it carefully. The Parkinson's was progressing faster than expected. Stress was accelerating it. Jack needed to rest, reduce anxiety, avoid physical exertion. I have 5 days, Jack said. After that, I'll rest. Mr. Sullivan, you're killing yourself. Then I'll die doing something that matters. They kept him overnight for observation. Ben stayed with him, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, refusing to leave. In the morning, Jack checked himself out against medical advice. The doctor made him sign forms. Jack's signature was barely legible, his hands shaking so badly the pen kept slipping. Danny was waiting in the parking lot. He helped Jack into the truck without comment. On the drive back, Jack said, "I need you to promise me something." Danny kept his eyes on the road. "What? If I don't make it to the competition, if the Parkinson's takes me before then, you have to finish this. You and Sarah. You expose Hayes. You make sure those 12 Marines are remembered. You're gonna make it. Promise me anyway." Danny was quiet for a long moment. "I promise." They drove the rest of the way in silence. That evening, sitting on his porch as the sun set, Jack thought about all the promises he had made in his life. To Margaret, to love and cherish. To his son, to always be there. To the Marine Corps, to protect and serve. He had broken most of them. But this one, this final promise to 12 dead Marines and one dead friend named Rabbit, this one he would keep, even if it killed him. 3 days before the competition, they had one final training session. Danny needed to prove he could perform under pressure. Jack set up a simulation, 5 targets at varying distances, 300 to 800 yards. Wind gusting between 15 and 20 miles per hour. Time limit, 15 minutes. Danny settled behind the rifle, Jack beside him, coaching. First target, 300 yards. Wind right to left. Adjust 2 minutes of angle. Danny made the adjustment, found his breath, fired. Hit. Second target, 400 yards. Wind shifting. Wait for it. Danny waited. The wind settled. He fired. Hit. Third target, 600 yards. This was the distance where most shooters struggled, where doubt crept in. "You've got this," Jack said. "Trust your training." Danny's hands were steady, his breathing controlled. He fired. Hit. Fourth target, 700 yards. Mirage dancing across the valley, making distance calculation difficult. Remember what your mother taught you about Mirage? It lies. Trust your math. Danny calculated, adjusted, fired, hit. Fifth target, 800 yards. Maximum effective range for most shooters, the kind of shot that separated professionals from amateurs. Jack watched Danny settle in, watched him read the wind, calculate the drop, find that perfect moment between heartbeats. The shot echoed across the valley. Through the spotting scope, Jack saw the impact. Dead center. Perfect. Danny stood up, and for the first time since Jack had met him, the young man smiled. A real smile. Not forced, not bitter. Genuine. "I felt it," Danny said. "Just like you said I would. That moment where everything goes still, and it's just you and the target, and nothing else matters. That's being a shooter. No, that's being alive." They packed up the equipment together. The Montana sky was that particular shade of blue that only happens in high country, deep and endless. "You're ready," Jack said. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. I just reminded you of what you already knew." They loaded the truck and drove back to the ranch. The competition was in 3 days. Hayes would be there. The media would be there. The truth would finally come out. Jack's hands shook against the steering wheel, but his mind was clear. 50 years. 50 years of waiting. 50 years of guilt. 50 years of knowing the truth and being unable to prove it. 3 more days. He could last 3 more days. He had to. For Rabbit, for those 12 Marines, for every person who had ever been silenced by powerful men who thought they were above consequences. 3 more days and Raymond Hayes would finally face judgment. Jack Sullivan was 76 years old. He was dying. His hands shook. His body was betraying him one cell at a time. But his aim, his purpose, was steady and true. One shot, one truth. That was all he needed. That evening, as Jack sat on his porch, watching the stars come out over the Bitterroot Mountains, Danny's truck pulled into the driveway. The young man got out, carrying a box. "Thought you might want company," Danny said. They sat together in silence, drinking whiskey as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in that darkness, ghosts moved. Rabbit and Tommy, the 12 Marines, all the dead who deserved better than they got. "Tomorrow," Danny said after a while, "we should go through the plan one more time. Make sure everyone knows their role." Jack nodded. Sarah would handle the media. Marcus would provide security. Ben would document everything. Danny would shoot. And Jack would finally tell the truth. "What if it doesn't work?" Danny asked. "What if we expose Hayes and nothing happens? What if people don't care?" "Then we tried. That's more than most people do." "Is it enough?" "It has to be." They finished their whiskey. Danny stood to leave, then paused. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a reason to pick up a rifle again, for showing me that I could still be a shooter, for helping me find something worth fighting for. You did the same for me." Danny nodded and drove away into the night. Jackie sat alone, hands shaking in his lap, and thought about last shots, about final missions, about dying men and the promises made to them. In 3 days, he would keep his promise, or die trying. Either way, Rabbit would finally know that Jack Sullivan had not forgotten, had never forgotten, would never forget. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant and eternal. Jack went inside, took his medications, and lay down in his bed. Sleep did not come easy, but when it did, he dreamed not of war, but of a young man named Mike Rodriguez, smiling in the sunlight, saying it was going to be a good day. For the first time in 50 years, Jack believed him. The morning Sarah Hayes walked into Jack Sullivan's life with evidence of a 50-year-old lie, the Montana sky was the color of gunmetal. She arrived at his ranch just after dawn, driving a rental car that looked out of place on the dirt road. Jack watched from his porch as she parked and stepped out, moving carefully, like someone who had learned not to trust the ground beneath their feet. The bruise on her face had deepened overnight, purple and black, the clear shape of an old man's hand across her cheek. Jack felt rage coil in his gut, hot and familiar. Danny's truck pulled in behind her. The young man had called ahead, said Sarah had information they needed to hear. Now he stood beside her like a bodyguard, his eyes scanning the tree line out of habit. Afghanistan had taught him to always check his six. "Come inside," Jack said. "Coffee's on." They gathered around his kitchen table, the same table where Margaret used to serve breakfast, where Kevin had done his homework, where Jack now ate most meals alone. Sarah opened her laptop and the modern world invaded his cabin. "I need to show you something," Sarah said. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, finding a file. "Before I play this, you need to understand. What you're about to hear is going to confirm everything you've believed for 50 years. But it's also going to make this very real, very dangerous." Jack's hands shook against the table. "Play it." The audio quality was poor, filtered through decades and multiple copies. But Raymond Hayes' voice was unmistakable. Younger, confident, casual. Through a translator's halting English, they heard the negotiation. 3 American prisoners for tactical intelligence, positions of Marine units, timing of patrols, everything the enemy would need to plan a devastating attack. And then Hayes' voice, clear as a church bell. "I'll delay the warning. Give you time to position your forces." Jack closed his eyes. Rabbit's face swam up from memory. 20 years old, grinning about a girl back home, saying he was going to marry her when his tour ended. Rabbit, who died calling for a medic, died slowly enough to know he was dying, died because his lieutenant made a deal with the enemy. The recording ended. Silence filled the kitchen like smoke. "Where did you get this?" Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sergeant Major William Crawford. He was Hayes' radio man at Hill 881. He's been carrying this recording for 50 years, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Why didn't he come forward before?" Sarah closed the laptop. "He tried. Right after the war, he was threatened with court-martial for making false accusations against an officer. They told him if he ever mentioned it again, they'd charge him with treason. So he kept quiet, kept the tape, kept his conscience as clean as he could. And now he's 80 years old and dying. He wants to set the record straight before he meets his maker." His words, not mine. Danny stood up and walked to the window. Jack could see the tension in the young man's shoulders, the way his hands flexed like he was looking for a weapon that was not there. "This is proof," Danny said, "real, actual proof. We could go to the military, to Congress, to the media right now." "No," Jack said, "we wait." Sarah looked at him sharply. "Why?" "Every day we wait is another day Hayes could destroy evidence or hurt someone. Because I need to see his face. I need to watch him and realize that he didn't get away with it. The competition is in 48 hours. Maximum media coverage, maximum impact. We expose him there. That's personal revenge, not justice. Maybe, but it's also the only thing that's kept me breathing for 50 years. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. 48 hours, but we take precautions. We make copies of everything. We distribute them to people we trust. If anything happens to any of us, the truth still comes out. They spent the morning making the evidence bulletproof. Sarah had contacts at 3 newspapers and 2 television networks. By noon, encrypted files were in the hands of journalists who knew how to use them. Ben Morrison arrived around 1, bringing Marcus Webb. Marcus moved through the door on his prosthetic leg like it was part of him, fluid and confident. He was 38, built like a middleweight boxer, with eyes that had seen too much and decided to keep looking anyway. Marcus shook Jack's hand. "Sir, it's an honor." "You served with Catherine Chen," Jack said. "She trained me at Quantico in 2009. Best instructor I ever had. When I lost my leg in Afghanistan, she's the one who kept me from eating my gun." Danny looked up at that. "My mother did that?" Marcus nodded. "She sent me letters while I was in the hospital in Germany. Told me about snipers she'd known who'd lost limbs, lost eyes, lost everything except their will to keep shooting. She said the rifle doesn't care what body it's attached to. Only the mind matters." "I never knew she did that. She didn't advertise it. But she saved a lot of lives, Danny. Not just with her shooting, with her words." Jack watched the exchange, seeing something shift in Danny's face. The young man had spent years seeing his mother as a distant figure, someone who loved the Corps more than her family. Maybe he was starting to understand that love was not a finite resource, that Catherine Chen had loved her son and her Marines both, fiercely and completely. Marcus turned to Jack. "Ben told me about the threats, about Hayes sending surveillance photos. I want you to know I'm in this fight now. Anyone comes after you or Danny, they go through me first." "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Catherine Chen saved my life. Her son is standing up for the truth. That makes this personal." Ben set a duffel bag on the table. "I brought some equipment, cameras, recording devices. If we're doing this at the competition, we need documentation. Multiple angles. Can't give Hayes any way to spin it." They spent the afternoon planning. Sarah would handle media coordination. Ben would manage the technical side. Marcus would provide security, watch for threats. Danny would shoot. And Jack would speak the truth. That evening, after the others had left, Danny stayed behind. He and Jack sat on the porch watching the sun paint the Bitterroot Mountains in shades of fire. "You scared?" Danny asked. "Terrified." "Me too." Jack looked at the young man. "You don't have to compete tomorrow. We have the evidence. Sarah can release it without you shooting a single round." "I know, but I need to do this. For my mom, for you, for Tommy. I need to prove I'm still a shooter." "You've already proven that." "Not to myself." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. The Montana night was vast and cold, the kind of darkness that made you feel small and significant all at once. "Tell me about the day Rabbit died," Danny said. "The whole story, not just the tactical parts." Jack had not told that story in full to anyone except Margaret. But something about the approaching competition, about the proximity of justice after 50 years of waiting, loosened his tongue. "It was March," he began, 1971. "We'd been on Hill 881 for 2 weeks providing sniper support for the firebase. Rabbit and I had a good position, overlooking the approaches from 3 sides. We were a team. He could read my mind, I could read his. That's how it works when you have been in the shit together long enough." "What was he like? Really like?" Jack smiled in the darkness. "He was from El Paso. Mexican-American kid who loved baseball and his mama's cooking. He carried a photo of a girl named Rosa in his helmet. He was going to marry her when he got home, buy a little house, teach 4th grade. He said kids that age still believed in heroes." "Did you believe in heroes?" "I believed in doing my job. Heroes were for people who didn't know any better. And now? Now I think heroes are just people who show up when they're needed." Rabbit showed up every day. He never complained. He never backed down. He was scared, like we all were, but he didn't let it stop him. Jack paused, remembering. The morning of the attack, Rabbit spotted the enemy officer first. High-value target, maybe a colonel, directing troops into position. I called it into Hayes, asked permission to engage. He told me to hold fire. "How long did you wait?" 45 minutes. We watched them position forces, set up ambush points, and coordinate fields of fire. I kept asking for permission. Hayes kept saying hold. Finally, I asked him directly what was happening. He said he was negotiating for prisoner release. Told me it was above my pay grade. Did you believe him? I wanted to. I was 23 years old. I still thought officers knew what they were doing. So I held fire. Rabbit wanted to take the shot anyway. He said something was wrong, said we needed to act. But I outranked him. I made him wait. And then the mortar started falling. First rounds hit right on our perimeter. Perfect targeting. Like they knew exactly where every position was. Because Hayes had told them. The firebase was overrun in minutes. Rabbit and I tried to fall back, provide cover fire. We got separated in the chaos. Jack's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I found him 20 minutes later, gut shot, lying in the mud. He knew he was dying. He looked at me and said, "Tell them it wasn't their fault. Tell the guys this wasn't their fault." Those were his last words. Then he was gone. Danny was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Tommy's last words were, 'Tell my wife I love her.' I dream about it every night, about not being able to save him." "We can't save them, Danny. They're gone. All we can do is make sure they're remembered, make sure the truth is told." Is that enough? It has to be. The next morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes before a storm. Jack woke at 4, his body refusing sleep, his mind already running through everything that could go wrong. He found Danny in his barn cleaning the Macmillan rifle. The young man worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Strip the bolt, clean the chamber, oil the action, check the scope mounting. "Can't sleep either?" Jack asked. Danny looked up. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the competition. All those people watching, all that pressure. You ready for it? I don't know. What if I choke? What if I can't perform when it matters?" Jack sat down on a hay bale, his joints protesting. "I ever tell you about the first time I had to shoot someone?" Danny shook his head. "Central Highlands, 1968. I was positioned in a building overlooking a street. Enemy soldier came around the corner. He was young, maybe 17, had a rifle, but he was looking the wrong direction. Easy shot, center mass. I had all the time in the world. Did you take it?" I froze. 3 seconds. Doesn't sound like much, but in combat, it's an eternity. My spotter was screaming at me to shoot. The enemy soldier started to turn. If I didn't shoot, he'd see us, kill us. "What did you do?" I remembered my training, stopped thinking about him as a person, saw him as a target, breathed, fired. He went down clean. 1 shot. And after? After, I threw up, shook for an hour, couldn't eat for 2 days. But I'd done my job, saved my spotter, saved myself. That's what you have to remember, Danny. When the pressure hits, you fall back on your training. You stop thinking. You just shoot. What if the training isn't enough? Then you dig deeper. You find something else to shoot for. For me, it was the men counting on me. For you, it's going to be different, but you'll find it, right when you need it most. Danny went back to cleaning the rifle. His hands were steady. That was progress. They spent the morning doing dry fire drills. No ammunition, just Danny practicing the mechanics, settling into position, finding his natural point of aim, controlling his breathing. Each repetition building muscle memory, burning the movements into his nervous system so deep that thought became unnecessary. Jack watched with the critical eye of someone who had trained hundreds of shooters. Danny's form was good, his breathing controlled, his trigger pull smooth. The young man had talent, more than talent. He had discipline, the kind that came from looking death in the face and deciding to keep living anyway. Around noon, Sarah called. "I'm at the competition venue. Security is everywhere. Hayes arrived this morning with an entourage, bodyguards, PR people. He's treating this like a campaign stop." "How does he seem?" "Confident. Too confident. He's giving interviews, talking about supporting the next generation of American warriors. Playing the hero." Jack felt his jaw tighten. 24 hours. That's all he has left. "Jack," Sarah's voice was careful. "Are you sure about this? Once we go public, there's no taking it back. Hayes will come after us with everything he has. Lawyers, character assassination. He'll try to destroy us. Let him try. The truth is the truth. Truth doesn't always win. Not against power and money. It will this time. Because we're not giving people a choice. We're putting it on national television with evidence so clear that even Hayes's lawyers can't spin it." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Crawford wants to be there. At the competition, he wants to face Hayes. He's too old, too sick. The stress could kill him. He says he's dying anyway. Might as well die doing something that matters." Jack understood that sentiment completely. Tell him yes. Tell him he's earned the right to be there. After they hung up, Jack sat at his kitchen table and wrote letters. One to Kevin, his son, one to Margaret's sister, one to the families of the 12 Marines who died on Hill 881. Letters he would mail tomorrow, after the competition. Letters that said he was sorry it took so long. Sorry he had not been strong enough to fight this battle sooner. But he was fighting it now, and he was going to win. That afternoon, Ben arrived with Marcus. They loaded equipment into Ben's truck. Cameras, tripods, recording devices. Enough technology to document every moment of what was coming. Marcus pulled Jack aside while Ben worked. "Sir, I need to tell you something about your hands." "What about them?" "The Parkinson's is getting worse. I can see it. You're having trouble with fine motor control. If you need to do anything at the competition that requires steady hands, I'm here. I can be your hands." Jack looked at the younger man. Marcus's prosthetic leg was visible below his jeans, titanium and carbon fiber. A visible reminder of sacrifice. But Marcus's eyes were steady. His hands were steady. He was whole where it counted. "Thank you," Jack said. "That means more than you know. Catherine told me once that shooters take care of each other, that it's not about individual glory. It's about the team, the mission. I'm on your team now, whatever you need." They loaded the last of the equipment and stood in Jack's driveway. 4 men preparing for war. A different kind of war than any of them had fought before, but war nonetheless. Danny checked his rifle one final time. Ben tested the cameras. Marcus scanned the perimeter, old habits dying hard. And Jack stood in the center of it all, hands shaking but mind clear. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow we end this." They spent the evening at Ben's shop, going over the plan one final time. Sarah would arrive early, position herself with the media. Ben and Marcus would set up cameras at strategic points. Danny would compete normally until the final round. Then, win or lose, they would drop the hammer. Jack would take the microphone and tell the truth. Play Crawford's recording for everyone to hear. Let Hayes stand there and try to deny his own voice. "What if he runs?" Danny asked. "What if he tries to leave before we can confront him?" Marcus smiled. "He won't get far. I've been tracking his movements all day. He's got security, but they're not expecting trouble. They're expecting adoring fans. And if his security tries to stop us," Marcus's smile faded, "then they'll learn what happens when you get between a ranger and his mission." Ben held up a hand. "No violence. We're not giving Hayes any ammunition to paint us as crazy veterans. We do this clean, professional. We let the evidence speak." "Agreed," Jack said. "No matter what Hayes does, no matter what he says, we stay calm. We present the facts. We let people draw their own conclusions." But they already knew what conclusions people would draw. You could not listen to that recording and hear anything except a man trading lives for glory. Hayes was done. He just did not know it yet. They broke up around midnight. Danny drove Jack back to the ranch, both of them too wired to sleep, but too tired to do anything productive. "You want me to stay?" Danny asked when they pulled up to the cabin. "Number. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "You going to be okay?" Jack looked at the young man. A month ago, Danny had been a broken veteran drinking himself to death. Now he was a shooter again, a warrior, someone who had found a reason to keep fighting. "I'm going to be better than okay," Jack said. "For the first time in 50 years, I'm going to be free." Danny drove away and Jack stood in his driveway watching taillights disappear. The night was cold and clear, the stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. He went inside and did not even try to sleep. Instead, he sat in Margaret's chair, the one she had claimed from the day they moved into this house. He could still smell her perfume if he concentrated, still hear her voice telling him to let it go, to forgive himself. But forgiveness was not the same as justice, and he had waited long enough. At 5 in the morning, Jack's phone rang. Sarah's voice was tight with stress. "Hayes knows. He knows we have the recording." "How?" "I don't know. But he called my cell phone 10 minutes ago, told me that if I go through with this, I'll regret it. He said he has resources I can't imagine, connections that will bury me." "Did he threaten you specifically?" "He said accidents happen, that I should be careful." Jack felt ice form in his chest. "Call the police and tell them what? That my grandfather is threatening me because I'm about to expose his war crimes? They'll think I'm hysterical." "Sarah, this is serious. Hayes is dangerous. I know, but I'm not backing down. Neither should you." Jack thought about 12 dead Marines, about Rabbit dying in the mud, about 50 years of silence. "We go forward," he said, "but we're careful. We stay together. We watch each other's backs. Like a fire team." Exactly like a fire team. Jack called the others. Within an hour, everyone was at Ben's shop. Coffee flowed, plans were reviewed, contingencies discussed. Crawford's recording was duplicated to 3 different devices. If one failed, they had backups. If Hayes somehow destroyed the evidence, copies existed in safe deposit boxes in 3 different cities. The truth was bulletproof now. Marcus laid out the security plan. He and Ben would stay close to Jack and Danny. Sarah would be in the press area protected by crowds and cameras. If Hayes's people tried anything, there would be witnesses. At 7 a.m., they loaded into 2 vehicles and drove to the competition venue. The Montana State Precision Rifle Championship was being held at a facility 2 hours from Jack's ranch. Purpose-built for long-range shooting, it had berms and targets out to 1,500 yards. The organizers expected 300 competitors and twice that many spectators. By the time they arrived, the parking lot was already half full. Trucks and SUVs from across the region, many with rifle cases visible in the beds. Shooters checking equipment, families setting up lawn chairs, vendors selling ammunition and accessories. And in the VIP area, surrounded by security and admirers, Raymond Hayes held court. Jack saw him from across the parking lot, 82 years old but standing straight, moving with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for anything. He wore a blazer with his medals pinned to the breast. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, decorations earned through other men's blood. Danny saw Jack's reaction and put a hand on his shoulder. "Not yet. We stick to the plan." Jack nodded, but his hands shook with more than Parkinson's. They checked in at the competitor registration. Danny drew a middle slot for the shooting order. Good. It would give them time to set up cameras, position Sarah with the media, make sure everything was ready. Marcus and Ben disappeared to place their equipment. Sarah went to the press area, credentials in hand, ready to play the role of friendly journalist until the moment came to drop the hammer. Jack and Danny found a quiet spot near the practice range. Danny dry fired a few times, getting the feel of the rifle. Jack watched, offering small corrections. Elbow down, shoulder tight, breathing steady. Around them, other shooters prepared. Serious men and women, most of them veterans, all of them dedicated to the craft of precision shooting. They nodded to Jack and Danny with the respect shooters showed each other. None of them knew what was about to happen. At 9 a.m., Hayes took the podium for his speech. Jack stood at the back of the crowd listening. Hayes talked about duty and sacrifice, about the honor of serving, about the next generation of American warriors and how competitions like this kept the spirit alive. He was good, charismatic, convincing. If you did not know the truth, you would believe every word. Jack felt Danny tense beside him. The young man's jaw was clenched, his hands in fists. "Easy," Jack whispered. "Remember the mission." Danny breathed out slowly, nodded, relaxed his hands. Hayes finished to applause. He worked the crowd afterward, shaking hands, posing for photos, playing the hero one last time. The shooting began at 10 a.m. qualification rounds at 300 yards. Danny was in the third group of 20 shooters. Jack walked him to the line. They went through the pre-shot routine together. Check the rifle, confirm 0, note wind conditions, breathe. The range officer gave the command to begin. Shooters settled into position all down the line. The crack of rifles filled the air, rolling across the valley like thunder. Danny's first shot felt wrong the moment it left the barrel. Jack saw it in the young man's body language. Tension in the shoulders, breath held too long. Through the spotting scope, Jack saw the impact. 7 ring, terrible for someone of Danny's skill. Danny's second shot was worse. 6 ring, he was spiraling, pressure crushing him. Jack knelt beside the young man. "Danny, look at me." Danny did not move his eyes from the scope. "Look at me," Jack repeated, firm but calm. Danny finally looked. His eyes were wide, panicked. "I can't do this. There's too many people. Too much noise. I'm back in Afghanistan. I can't breathe." "Yes, you can. You're in Montana. You're safe. This is just a rifle and a target. No one dies if you miss. Tommy died because I missed. Tommy died because war is chaos. This is not war. This is you proving to yourself that you're still a shooter. Now breathe with me. In through the nose, out through the mouth." They breathed together, 5 breaths. 10. The panic slowly receded from Danny's eyes. "Better?" Danny nodded. "You have 3 shots left. Take them one at a time. Don't think about your score. Don't think about the crowd. Just shoot." Danny settled back behind the rifle. This time, when Jack watched him, he saw the change. The shoulders relaxed, the breathing steady, the focus absolute. The third shot rang out. Through the spotting scope, Jack saw it hit. 9 ring, better. Fourth shot, 10 ring, good. Fifth shot, 10 ring, center mass, perfect. Final score, 42 out of 50. Not great, but enough to qualify. Danny would advance to the next round. The young man stood up, and Jack saw tears in his eyes. "I almost quit. I almost walked away." "But you didn't. That's what matters." "I felt him there. Tommy. I swear I felt him standing beside me, telling me to keep shooting. Maybe he was. Maybe they're all here. Rabbit, Tommy, your mother, all the ones we've lost. Maybe they want to see us win. The competition continued through the day. 400-yard round, 500, 600. Each distance eliminating more shooters, narrowing the field to those who could perform under pressure. Danny advanced through each round, not dominating but surviving. His scores improved as the day went on, the rhythm of shooting overriding his anxiety. By evening, he had made it to the final 16. Marcus found Jack during a break. Cameras are in position. Sarah has 3 different media outlets ready to broadcast. Crawford just arrived. He's in the parking lot. Says he needs to see you. Jack found Sergeant Major William Crawford sitting in a folding chair beside a camper van, oxygen tank beside him. The old man looked like a strong wind would blow him away, but his eyes were sharp, alert, determined. Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan, Crawford said, offering a hand. His grip was weak, but his voice was strong. Sergeant Major, thank you for coming. Thank you for keeping that recording. Crawford waved it off. Should have come forward 50 years ago. Should have been braver. But Hayes scared me, threatened me, told me I'd spend the rest of my life in Leavenworth if I ever said a word. You're here now. That's what counts. I'm dying, Sullivan. Cancer. Doctor gives me 2 months, maybe 3. Figured I should set things right before I meet St. Peter. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 old soldiers carrying the weight of decisions made decades ago. Are you ready for this? Jack asked. Hayes is going to deny everything. He's going to call you a liar. Let him. I've got the truth on my side, and I've got nothing left to lose. Jack looked at the man who had kept a secret for 50 years. A secret that had eaten at him, corroded his conscience, made him wake up every morning knowing he had chosen silence over justice. It takes more courage to speak truth late than to stay silent forever, Jack said. You're a good man, Sergeant Major. Crawford shook his head. A good man would have spoken up 50 years ago. I'm just trying to be less of a coward before I die. The final round was scheduled for 6 p.m. 8 shooters, 1,000 yards, 3 shots each. Winner takes all. Danny was ranked 7th going into it. Marcus had shot his way to 4th. A civilian shooter named Tyler Morrison led the pack, cocky and confident, talking about how he was going to show the military guys how real shooting was done. Hayes was scheduled to present the trophy to the winner, to stand on stage and have his photo taken, to bask in the glory of association with excellence. It was perfect. The sun was low on the horizon when the final 8 took their positions. Shadows stretched long across the range. Wind had picked up 15 miles per hour with gusts to 20. Difficult conditions, championship conditions. Tyler Morrison shot first. Solid performance, 2 10s and a 9. Score, 29 out of 30. The crowd applauded. Tyler took a bow. Marcus shot second, methodical, patient, 3 10s. Perfect score. The crowd went wild. A disabled veteran shooting perfect at 1,000 yards was the kind of story that made news. Danny was 7th in the order. He watched the other shooters, learning from their mistakes, adjusting his strategy. When his turn came, he walked to the line with Jack beside him. This is it, Jack said. Everything we've worked for comes down to these 3 shots. No pressure then. Jack almost smiled. You've got this. I've seen you shoot. You're ready. Danny settled behind Catherine's rifle, the Macmillan TAC-3 3.8 that had carried his mother through 1,000 competitions. The rifle that had been cleaned and maintained with the same discipline she brought to everything in her life. Through the scope, the target looked impossibly far. 1,000 yards was more than half a mile. At that distance, the bullet would drop 40 feet. The wind would push it 10 feet to the side. Gravity, air resistance, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation, all of it mattered. Danny did the calculations automatically. Years of training had burned the ballistics tables into his brain. He made his adjustments, dialed his scope, found his breath. The first shot surprised him. It always did when you were shooting well. The perfect trigger pull that you felt rather than thought about. The recoil against his shoulder. The sense that the bullet was already on target before you consciously knew you had fired. Through the spotting scope, Jack called it, 10 ring, high left. Danny adjusted. The wind had shifted slightly. He compensated, settled back in. Second shot, perfect trigger pull, perfect recoil, perfect follow-through. X-ring, Jack called. Dead center. Danny allowed himself a small smile. One more shot, one more perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats. He loaded the final round, settled in, found his natural point of aim, breathed. The world went quiet. All the noise of the competition faded. The crowd disappeared. Even Jack's presence beside him became distant. It was just Danny, the rifle, and a target 1,000 yards away. Tommy's voice in his memory. You got this, brother. Catherine's voice from a childhood half remembered. One shot at a time, baby. That's all it ever is. Jack's voice from a month of training. Trust yourself. Danny pulled the trigger. The bullet flew true. Through the spotting scope, Jack saw it impact. X-ring. Perfect center. Danny Chen had just shot a perfect score at 1,000 yards in front of 300 witnesses and a dozen cameras. The crowd erupted. But Jack was not watching the crowd. He was watching Raymond Hayes, standing in the VIP area, looking at his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. Hayes did not know it yet, but his time had just run out. After the shooting ended, after the scores were tallied, after Marcus Webb was declared the overall winner by a single point over Danny Chen, the real competition began. Hayes took the podium to present the trophy. Cameras focused on him. Media recorded every word. He talked about American greatness and warrior spirit and the next generation carrying the torch. And then Sarah Hayes stepped forward from the press corps. Grandfather, she said, loud enough for the microphones to catch. I need to ask you about Hill 881 South. Hayes' smile froze. Sarah, this isn't the time. I think it's exactly the time. You're standing here celebrating marksmanship and military excellence. But you're not a marksman. You're not excellent. You're a murderer. The crowd went silent. Cameras swiveled. Reporters moved closer. Hayes tried to laugh it off. Sarah, you're upset. We'll talk about this later. Sarah pulled out her phone, held it up. I have a recording from your radio man, Sergeant Major William Crawford. Would you like to hear it? Hayes' face went pale. Sarah, don't. She pressed play. Hayes' voice filled the air. Younger but unmistakable. Negotiating with the enemy, trading intelligence for glory, promising to delay warnings. I'll delay the warning. Give you time to position your forces. The crowd stood frozen. You could have heard a pin drop. Hayes tried to speak. That's out of context. That's doctored. That's not what happened. Jack Sullivan stepped forward. Walked through the crowd with hands that shook, but with purpose that did not. He took the microphone from Hayes' nerveless fingers. My name is Jack Sullivan. I was the sniper providing overwatch on Hill 881 South on March 10th, 1971. I called in a warning about enemy positions 45 minutes before the attack. Lieutenant Raymond Hayes told me to hold fire. Told me he was negotiating. I followed orders. 12 Marines died. My spotter, Corporal Mike Rodriguez, died in my arms. Jack's voice was steady now, 50 years steady. Colonel Hayes has been lying about that day for 50 years. He's written books about it, given speeches, earned medals, all built on the graves of men who trusted him. Men who died because he traded their lives for his glory. Today we present evidence that proves what really happened. Today the truth comes out. Sergeant Major Crawford stood up from his wheelchair, walked forward on legs that shook, took the microphone. I was there. I heard everything. I kept silent because I was threatened. But I'm dying now, and I won't die a coward. Everything on that recording is true. Hayes is a traitor. Those 12 Marines deserve justice. Hayes tried to run. His security moved to help him, but Marcus Webb stepped into their path, and something in the veterans' eyes made them stop. Media swarmed. Questions flew. Cameras captured everything. And Raymond Hayes stood in the center of it all, watching his carefully constructed lie crumble into dust. Jack Sullivan stood beside Danny Chen and watched justice happen. His hands shook, his body was failing. But his mind was clear and his conscience was finally clean. Rabbit, he thought, we got him. After 50 years, we got him. Somewhere in the Montana sky, the sun set over the mountains, painting the world in shades of red and gold. And in a parking lot full of shooters and veterans and people who understood sacrifice, an old wrong was finally made right. The cameras kept rolling long after Raymond Hayes stopped trying to explain himself. Jack Sullivan stood on the podium, watching an 82-year-old man realize that lies have expiration dates. Hayes' face had gone from confident to confused to cornered in the space of 3 minutes. His handlers circled him like defensive linemen, but there was no protecting him from the truth playing on repeat through a dozen speakers. I'll delay the warning. Give you time to position your forces. His own voice, his own words, undeniable. The media swarm was immediate and merciless. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras pushed closer. Someone from CNN was already doing a stand-up report, the kind that would lead the evening news. Sarah Hayes stood among them, no longer a granddaughter but a journalist who had just broken the story of her career. Hayes tried to leave. His security detail formed up around him, but Marcus Webb stood in their path like a wall made of bone and titanium. The former ranger did not say a word. He did not have to. Something in his eyes made it clear that the only way through was over his body, and nobody wanted to test whether that was possible. Danny Chen appeared at Jack's elbow, steadying him as the Parkinson's tremors intensified. The young man's hands were rock solid, all the shaking gone now that the shooting was done. He had fired 3 perfect shots at 1,000 yards and then watched his mentor deliver justice. It was the kind of day that changed a man. "We should go," Danny said quietly, "before this turns into something we can't control." "Not yet. I need to see this through." "Jack, you're shaking bad. You need your medication." 5 more minutes. Those 5 minutes stretched into 20 as the scene devolved into chaos. Hayes's lawyer arrived, a sharp-dressed man who immediately started talking about defamation and litigation. Sergeant Major Crawford, still standing despite his oxygen tank and his cancer, told the lawyer exactly where he could shove his legal threats. Ben Morrison documented everything, 3 cameras capturing every angle, every word, every moment of Hayes's public dismantling. The competition organizers tried to restore order, but this was beyond their control now. What had been a shooting competition was now a crime scene. Not literally, not yet, but the military police were already being called. Questions about jurisdiction and statute of limitations were being shouted. Someone mentioned the possibility of a congressional investigation. Through it all, Hayes said nothing. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air, but no sound came out. Jack had imagined this moment for 50 years, had dreamed of watching Hayes face consequences. But now that it was happening, he felt no satisfaction, only a deep, bone-tired exhaustion. The 12 Marines were still dead. Rabbit was still dead. Justice did not bring them back. But it mattered anyway. It had to matter. Finally, Hayes' security managed to extract him, hustling him toward a black SUV in the parking lot. The media followed like wolves tracking wounded prey. Sarah went with them, her press credentials giving her access others did not have. She looked back once at Jack, and he saw something in her eyes that might have been gratitude or might have been grief. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into smaller groups, everyone talking at once. Veterans clustered together, their faces showing a mix of anger and vindication. Younger shooters looked confused, unsure what they had just witnessed. Competition officials huddled with their lawyers, no doubt worried about liability. Jack's legs gave out. Danny caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him to a sitting position on the edge of the podium. Marcus was there instantly, checking pulse, looking for signs of medical distress. Ben abandoned his cameras and sprinted over. "Jack, talk to me," Ben said. "You with us?" Jack's vision swam. The world tilted sideways, his hands shook so violently he could not control them. The Parkinsons had been held at bay by adrenaline and purpose, but now both were draining away and his body was demanding payment. "Need my meds," Jack managed. "In the truck, blue bottle." Marcus ran. Danny kept Jack upright, talking to him in a low, steady voice, the same tone he probably used to calm wounded soldiers in Afghanistan. "Breathe with me, in and out. You're okay. We got you." The medication arrived. Jack swallowed pills with water that Danny held to his lips. Gradually, slowly, the tremors decreased. The world stabilized. He could breathe again. "We need to get you to a hospital," Ben said. "No hospitals. I'm fine. You just collapsed. I'm old and sick, and I've been running on fumes for a month. I'll be fine once I rest." Ben looked at Danny and Marcus. The 3 of them had a silent conversation that ended with everyone looking unhappy but accepting. "My ranch," Jack said. "Take me home." They loaded him into Ben's truck like fragile cargo. Danny drove Jack's vehicle. Marcus followed in his own. A 3-car convoy heading back toward the Bitterroot Mountains, while behind them, the story they had unleashed spread across the country at the speed of the internet. Jack dozed in the passenger seat, his medication making him foggy. He drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversation. Ben on the phone with someone, describing what had happened. The radio playing news updates, Hayes' name already trending, the soft rumble of the truck on mountain roads. When they reached the ranch, the sun had set. The house was dark. They got Jack inside, settled him into his chair, built a fire in the wood stove. Someone made coffee. Someone else ordered pizza. And slowly, quietly, the 4 men began to process what they had done. Crawford called around midnight. His voice was weak but satisfied. We did it, Sullivan. After 50 years, we actually did it. You did it, Sergeant Major. That recording was everything. I'm getting calls from military investigators, from the DOJ, from congressional staffers. They want statements. They want testimony. They were talking about reopening the investigation. You up for that? Crawford laughed, which turned into a cough. I'm dying anyway. Might as well spend my last weeks watching Hayes burn. After they hung up, Jack sat in his chair watching flames dance in the wood stove. Danny had fallen asleep on the couch. Marcus dozed in the spare bedroom. Ben was on the porch, smoking a cigar he had been saving for a special occasion. Jack's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Are you okay? He typed back with shaking hands. Tired but alive. You? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. My father called. Hayes' son. He said I've destroyed the family, that I'll never be welcome again, that I've chosen strangers over blood. Jack stared at the message, trying to find words that would help. Finally, he typed, you chose truth over lies. That's what journalists do. Your grandfather made his choices 50 years ago. You just made sure he faced them. The response came quickly. Thank you for everything, for being brave enough to fight this battle. Thank you for helping me finish it. He set the phone down and closed his eyes. Sleep came hard, full of dreams that were half memory, half nightmare. Rabbit's face, the red clay of Hill 881. Hayes' voice on that recording, casual and cruel. The 12 Marines who had trusted their lieutenant and died for it. Jack woke before dawn, his body aching, his mind surprisingly clear. The medication had worn off and the tremors were back, but manageable. He made coffee with hands that spilled only a little and sat on his porch watching the mountains emerge from darkness. Danny found him there an hour later. Couldn't sleep either, the young man asked. Too much to think about. They sat in silence, watching the sun paint the peaks in shades of copper and gold. The same sun that had risen over Hill 881 50 years ago. The same sun that would keep rising long after both of them were gone. What happens now? Danny asked. I don't know. I've been focused on this for so long. I never thought about after. You think Hayes will go to jail? Jack shrugged. He's rich, connected, old. The military justice system moves slow. Even if they charge him, he might die before trial. So he gets away with it. No, he doesn't get away with it. His reputation is destroyed. His legacy is ruined. Everyone knows what he did. That's not nothing. Danny was quiet for a moment. My mom used to say that shame was worse than prison for men like that. Men who care about how they're perceived. She said you could survive jail, but you couldn't survive everyone knowing you're a coward. Your mother was right. The morning news brought confirmation of what they had suspected. Hayes' story had gone national. Every major network led with it. Retired Marine colonel accused of betraying troops. Secret recording reveals Vietnam War conspiracy. Granddaughter exposes family secret. The phone started ringing at 7 a.m. and did not stop. Reporters requesting interviews. Veterans groups wanting statements. Military investigators needing testimony. Jack's lawyer, a woman he had hired the week before in anticipation of this, called to warn him that Hayes was already threatening to sue everyone involved. Let him sue, Jack said. Discovery will be interesting. The lawyer laughed. That's what I told his lawyer. Funny how quickly they backed down when I mentioned subpoenaing his military records. By noon, the ranch had become a circus. News vans parked on the road outside Jack's property. Reporters with cameras trying to get footage. Neighbors calling to ask what was happening. Jack ignored all of it, staying inside with the curtains drawn, letting the lawyer handle media requests. Sarah called in the afternoon. I'm getting death threats. Jack sat up straight. What kind of threats? Online mostly. People saying I'm a traitor, that I destroyed an American hero, that I should be ashamed for attacking my own grandfather. Sarah, you need to take those seriously. Go to the police. I have. They're investigating. But Jack, some of these people are serious. They're finding my address, my workplace. They're posting photos of me online. Marcus was across the room and he heard enough to understand. He took the phone from Jack. Miss Hayes, this is Marcus Webb. Where are you right now? Sarah told him. Marcus's jaw tightened. Stay there. Lock your doors. I'm coming to get you. You're staying somewhere safe until this calms down. Marcus, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm telling. Catherine Chen's daughter is not going to be threatened on my watch. Be ready in 30 minutes. He hung up and looked at Jack. I'm bringing her here to the ranch. It's defensible, it's remote, and we can protect her. Agreed. Danny, go with him. The two veterans left. moving with the coordinated efficiency of men who had trained for exactly this kind of situation. Ben stayed behind, checking the perimeter, making sure the property was secure. Jack sat in his chair, hands shaking, and realized that exposing Hayes had consequences beyond what he had imagined. They had poked a hornet's nest. Now the hornets were swarming. Marcus and Danny returned 3 hours later with Sarah. She looked exhausted, carrying a single bag, her eyes red from crying or fear or both. Jack stood to greet her, and she hugged him hard enough to hurt. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not leaving me alone. You're family now. We take care of our own." They set her up in this guest room, the one that had been Margaret's sewing room before she died. Ben went home to get supplies. Marcus began a security assessment of the property, identifying sight lines and approach routes. Danny cleaned weapons with the methodical care of someone who hoped he would not need them, but was prepared if he did. Jack watched it all from his chair, feeling like a general who had won a battle but not the war. That evening, Crawford called again. His voice was weaker than the day before. "Sullivan, I need to tell you something. I'm checking into hospice tomorrow. The doctors say it's time." "Sergeant Major, I'm sorry." "Don't be. I've had a good run, and I got to do one last good thing before the end. That's more than most people get." "You did more than one good thing. You saved lives with that recording. You gave 12 families closure." Crawford was quiet for a moment. "You think so? You think it mattered?" "I know it did. Then I can die easy. But Sullivan, watch your back. Hayes has friends, powerful friends. They're not going to let this stand without a fight." "We're ready." "I hope so, because men like Hayes don't go down quiet." They talked for a few more minutes, two old soldiers saying goodbye without saying the word. When Jack hung up, he knew he would never speak to Crawford again. The man would be dead within a week, his conscience finally clear, his duty finally done. Jack raised a glass of whiskey to the absent Sergeant Major, and the others joined him in the toast. "To Crawford," Ben said, "to doing the right thing even when it's hard." They drank. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Hayes had been arrested, not for what happened in the war. The statute of limitations and jurisdictional issues made that complicated, but for something more recent, more provable. Witness intimidation, threatening a federal witness, obstruction of justice. Sarah had given her recorded conversation with Hayes to investigators, the one where he threatened her, told her to drop the investigation, hit her hard enough to leave a bruise. Combined with the surveillance photos he had sent to Jack and testimony from Crawford about being threatened 50 years ago, prosecutors had enough to charge him. Hayes was released on bail within hours, but the damage was done. His mugshot was everywhere. The American hero led away in handcuffs. The narrative had shifted completely, but Hayes was not finished, not by a long shot. His countermove came that afternoon, delivered through his lawyer and amplified by friendly media outlets. Hayes was claiming that a recording was fake, doctored, AI-generated. He had hired audio forensics experts who would testify that the tape had been manipulated. He was painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign by bitter veterans with mental health issues. And he was going after Jack specifically. The statement his lawyer released was calculated and vicious. Jack Sullivan is a man suffering from severe Parkinson's disease and documented PTSD from his service in Vietnam. While we honor his service, we must question his mental state and his motivations. Mr. Sullivan has harbored a grudge against Colonel Hayes for 50 years, ever since he was reprimanded for failing to properly execute his duties as a sniper. Rather than accept responsibility for his own failures, Mr. Sullivan has built an elaborate conspiracy theory to deflect blame. It is sad to see a veteran's final years consumed by delusion and bitterness. Jack read the statement on his phone, his hands shaking with rage more than disease. "They're calling you crazy," Danny said quietly. "They're trying to discredit you." "Let them try. We have evidence. They have lawyers and money and a media machine. They're going to make this a fight." And Jack was tired. So goddamn tired. The Parkinson's was getting worse. The stress was accelerating it. Some mornings he could barely get out of bed. His medication was being adjusted weekly, chasing symptoms that kept evolving. But he was not done fighting. Sarah's newspaper published her full story 2 days later. 6,000 words of carefully documented journalism, laying out the entire history of Hill 881, the cover-up, the threats, the 50 years of silence. She included interviews with family members of the 12 Marines who died, statements from military historians, analysis from legal experts. It was devastating, thorough, undeniable. Hayes' team released their audio analysis the same day, claiming the recording showed signs of manipulation. Their expert, a man with impressive credentials and a history of testifying for wealthy defendants, said he was 90% certain the tape was fake. The story split along predictable lines. Conservative outlets defended Hayes, questioning the motives of those attacking a decorated veteran. Liberal outlets condemned him, calling for accountability and justice. Social media became a battlefield, with both sides claiming moral high ground. And in the middle of it all, Jack Sullivan just wanted to rest. He was on the porch when the first brick came through his window. It was 2 a.m., 6 days after the exposure. Jack was having another sleepless night, sitting in the darkness, trying to will his hands to stop shaking. The brick crashed through the living room window with a sound like thunder, glass exploding across the floor. Marcus was out of bed instantly, weapon in hand, Danny right behind him. They cleared the house in seconds, found the brick with a note rubber banded to it. "Traitor, you should have died in Vietnam with the rest of the cowards." Ben called the sheriff. Deputies arrived within 20 minutes, took statements, collected evidence. They promised to increase patrols, but everyone knew the ranch was too remote for regular monitoring. "You need to leave," Ben said after the deputies were gone. "Go somewhere safe until this blows over." "I'm not leaving my home." "Jack, they threw a brick through your window. Next time it might be something worse. Then we'll deal with it." Marcus agreed with Ben. "Sir, I've done executive protection work. I know how these situations escalate. Whoever did this was testing our response time. They'll be back. Let them come." Danny was the one who finally got through to him. "Jack, you want to honor Rabbit's memory? You want to make sure this fight meant something? Then stay alive. You can't finish the mission if you're dead." Jack looked at the young man who had become like a son to him. "What do you suggest?" "My apartment in town, small, secure, easy to defend. We move there temporarily, keep the ranch under surveillance, wait for things to calm down." It made sense. Jack hated it, but it made sense. They packed that night, loading essentials into trucks by flashlight. By dawn, Jack Sullivan was sleeping in Danny Chen's spare bedroom, a guest in someone else's home, driven from his own property by people who would rather attack an old man than face uncomfortable truths. The apartment was small but defensible. Second floor, one entrance, good sight lines. Marcus set up a rotation, one person awake at all times, cameras on the door, weapons within reach. Jack felt like a prisoner, but a live prisoner was better than a dead martyr. Crawford died on the 8th day after the exposure. Jack got the call from Crawford's daughter. Her father had passed peacefully in hospice, surrounded by family, finally free of the cancer and the guilt he had carried for half a century. "Did he seem at peace?" Jack asked. "More than I've ever seen him. He kept saying he'd done his duty, that he'd set things right. Whatever you two accomplished together, it mattered to him. It mattered to me too. Your father was a good man. He said the same about you. He said Jack Sullivan was the kind of Marine the Corps needed more of. The kind who wouldn't let sleeping dogs lie when those dogs had teeth." After the call, Jack sat in Danny's living room and cried. Not for Crawford specifically, though he grieved the man's passing, but for all of it, for Rabbit and the 12 Marines, for 50 years of carrying weight that should have been shared, for justice that came too late to save anyone, but still mattered anyway. Danny found him there and sat beside him without speaking, just present, just there, the way brothers were supposed to be. Hayes' legal team filed motions to suppress the recording, claiming it violated wiretapping laws. They filed defamation suits against Sarah, against Jack, against Ben and Marcus and Danny. They were going scorched earth, trying to bury the truth under an avalanche of litigation. But something unexpected happened. Other veterans started coming forward. First one, then 5, then 20, all with stories about Raymond Hayes, about orders that did not make sense, about missions that went sideways because of Hayes' decisions, about men who died while Hayes advanced his career. Not all the stories were provable. Some were hearsay. Some were decades-old memories that could not be verified. But the pattern was undeniable. Hayes had a history of sacrificing others for his own gain. The military could not ignore it anymore. The Department of Defense announced a formal investigation, not a criminal prosecution, not yet, but an official review of Hayes' service record in the events at Hill 881. They would interview witnesses, review documents, determine whether Hayes' medals and honors were properly awarded. It was something, not justice but accountability, not punishment, but recognition that questions needed answers. Jack watched the announcement on television from Danny's couch, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he was too shaky to drink. "We're winning," Danny said. "Are we?" Hayes is still free, still rich, still defended by half the country. But the truth is out. You can't put that back in the bottle. Marcus came in from the balcony where he had been on watch. "Mail just arrived. Something for you, Jack." It was a letter hand-addressed, no return address. Jack opened it carefully, half expecting anthrax or a threat. Instead, he found a single page handwritten in shaky script. "Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan. You don't know me, but I knew Mike Rodriguez. Rabbit was my friend. We went through boot camp together. I was supposed to be in Hill 881 that day, but I was on R&R. Rabbit died in my place. I've carried that guilt for 50 years, wondering why I lived and he didn't. Your testimony, your fight to expose Hayes, it doesn't bring Rabbit back. But it tells me his death meant something, that someone remembered, that someone cared enough to fight. Thank you for not forgetting. Thank you for making sure the world knows what really happened. Semper Fi, Robert Martinez, USMC retired." Jack read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He carried it with him for the rest of his life. The days blurred together. Jack's Parkinson's continued to worsen despite medication adjustments. Some mornings he could not dress himself. Some afternoons he could not hold a fork. Danny helped him without comment, without pity, just doing what needed to be done. Sarah visited when she could, though she was drowning in work. Her story had exploded. Book deals, movie options, speaking invitations. She was becoming famous for destroying her own grandfather, and the weight of it showed in her eyes. "You okay?" Jack asked during one visit. "Honestly? No, my family won't speak to me. I get death threats daily. Half the country thinks I'm a hero, and half thinks I'm a traitor. I don't feel like either. I just feel tired." "Welcome to the club." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Was it worth it? Knowing what you know now, would you do it again? Jack thought about Rabbit, about the 12 Marines, about 50 years of silence. Every time. 2 weeks after Crawford's death, the audio forensics came back. An independent lab, commissioned by the military investigation, analyzed Hayes' recording with equipment far more sophisticated than what his hired expert had used. Their conclusion: the recording was authentic. No signs of manipulation. No evidence of AI generation. Hayes' voice. Hayes' words. Hayes' crime. The expert Hayes had hired was discredited. Turned out he had a history of providing favorable testimony to whoever paid him. His 90% certainty meant nothing against actual science. Hayes' defense collapsed. His lawyer stopped making public statements. His media appearances dried up. The friendly outlets that had defended him went quiet. Even his most loyal supporters began to distance themselves. And finally, 3 weeks after the exposure at the shooting competition, the Marine Corps made its announcement. An investigation has determined that medals and commendations awarded to then-Lieutenant Raymond Hayes for actions at Hill 881 South were based on false and misleading reports. These honors are hereby revoked. Additionally, evidence suggests Hayes may have compromised operational security and placed Marines under his command at unnecessary risk. Due to Mr. Hayes' age and health and the complexities of military jurisdiction over incidents that occurred 50 years ago, criminal prosecution is not being pursued at this time. However, the Marine Corps wishes to acknowledge the service and sacrifice of the 12 Marines who died at Hill 881 South, and to recognize that their deaths were the result of failures in leadership and judgment. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Jack read the statement sitting in Danny's apartment, surrounded by the men who had become his brothers. Ben, Marcus, Danny, and Sarah, who had sacrificed her family to tell the truth. "They didn't charge him," Jack said. "He won't see the inside of a cell." "No," Marcus replied. "But everyone knows what he did. His legacy is destroyed. That's a different kind of prison." Is it enough? Jack thought about Rabbit, 20 years old forever, lying in red clay soil on the other side of the world. He thought about 12 families who had believed their sons died heroes, not pawns. He thought about 50 years of lies. It has to be. That night, Jack's phone rang, a number he did not recognize. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was old and bitter and breaking. "You destroyed me," Raymond Hayes said. "Everything I built, everything I earned, my reputation, my legacy, all of it gone because you couldn't let the past stay buried. 12 Marines, Jack said. 12 men who trusted you, who died because you traded their lives for glory. That's what destroyed you. I just made sure people knew about it. You self-righteous son of a bitch. You act like you're some kind of hero, but you're just a bitter old man who can't accept that war is complicated. That command requires difficult choices. You didn't make a difficult choice. You made a selfish one, and then you lied about it for 50 years. Hayes was breathing hard. I hope you're satisfied. I hope destroying an 82-year-old man makes you feel like a big man. I don't feel satisfied. I feel tired. But I also feel like I finally did what I should have done 50 years ago. I finally told the truth. The truth. You wouldn't know the truth if it bit you. You're sick, Sullivan, mentally and physically. You should be in a home somewhere, drooling on yourself, not playing hero. Maybe. But I'm not the one who got stripped of their medals. I'm not the one whose obituary will lead with the word disgraced. That's on you, Hayes. That's what you built with your lies. Hayes hung up without another word. Jack set the phone down, his hands shaking worse than usual. Danny appeared in the doorway. You okay? Hayes called. Wanted me to know how much he hates me. Good. Means we got to him. Yeah, but Danny could see the toll it was taking. Jack looked older than his 66 years. The Parkinson's had accelerated dramatically in the past month. The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance. It was killing him, and they both knew it. You need to rest, Danny said. Really rest. The fight's over. We won. You can let go now. Not yet. Not until I know it sticks. What else is there to do? Visit? I need to visit. Visit who? The families. The 12 families. I need to tell them in person. I need to apologize for not speaking up sooner. I need them to know their sons were heroes who were betrayed, not by the enemy, but by one of their own. Jack, you're barely able to walk across a room. A trip like that will kill you. Then I'll die doing something that matters. Danny looked at the old man who had become his teacher, his friend, his brother. And he understood that some missions could not be abandoned, no matter the cost. Okay, Danny said, but I'm driving, and we're doing this smart. Planning, preparation. We're not going to kill you on some half-assed road trip. Deal. They spent the next week planning. 12 families, 7 states, 3,000 miles. It would take 2 weeks minimum, probably 3. Jack's doctor said he was insane, that the stress and travel would accelerate his decline dramatically, that he might not survive the trip. Jack went anyway. They left on a Monday morning. Morning. Danny driving Jack's truck. Marcus following in his own vehicle for security. Ben stayed behind to watch Sarah and maintain the ranch. The convoy rolled out of Montana as the sun rose over the mountains, heading east toward families who had waited 50 years for answers. The first stop was in Nebraska. The family of Lance Corporal James Chen, no relation to Danny, but the coincidence was noted. Chen had been 19 when he died, engaged to his high school sweetheart, planning to use his GI Bill to become an electrician. His mother was 86 now, living with her daughter. She sat in a wheelchair, mind still sharp, and listened as Jack told her what really happened, how her son had died, how the lieutenant who was supposed to protect him had instead betrayed him. She cried, and then she thanked Jack for finally telling the truth. That happened at every stop. Families who had carried questions for decades, who had suspected something was wrong but never had proof. Mothers who needed to know their sons had not died for nothing. Fathers who wanted confirmation that their boys had been good Marines betrayed by bad leadership. Jack told them everything, showed them the evidence, let them listen to Hayes' voice on that recording, trading their sons' lives for prisoners and glory. Some of them raged, some wept, some sat in silence, processing information that changed everything they thought they knew. But all of them thanked Jack for coming, for caring enough to make the trip, for refusing to let their sons be forgotten. By the time they reached the 7th family in Texas, Jack could barely walk. The Parkinson's had him in its grip, squeezing harder each day. Danny had to help him from the truck. Marcus carried him upstairs when necessary. They were racing against Jack's body, trying to complete the mission before he physically could not continue. The 12th and final family lived in Virginia, the family of Corporal Mike Rodriguez, Rabbit. Rosa was 68 now. She had never married, had never moved on from the boy she was supposed to marry when he came home from Vietnam. She lived in a small house filled with photos of a young Marine who smiled in every picture. She opened the door and saw Jack standing there, held upright by Danny and Marcus. and she knew immediately who he was. "You're Jack Sullivan," she said. "Rabbit's friend." Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. "Come in, please. I've been waiting 50 years to meet you." They sat in her living room, surrounded by memories of a man who had been dead longer than he had been alive. Rosa served coffee with hands that shook only slightly less than Jack's. "Tell me about the day he died," Rosa said. "The truth. All of it." So Jack did. Every detail. Every moment. How Rabbit had spotted the target. How Jack had called for permission. How Hayes had delayed. How the mortars had started falling. How Jack had found Rabbit in the mud, gut shot, dying slowly. How Rabbit's last words had been, "Tell them it wasn't their fault." Rosa wept, but when she finished, she smiled through her tears. "He was a good man," she said. "I always knew that. But now I know he died trying to save his brothers. That's something. That's more than I had before." "I'm sorry I didn't tell the truth sooner," Jack said. "I'm sorry I let Hayes get away with it for 50 years. You were scared, young, threatened. I understand, but you're telling the truth now. That's what matters." She gave Jack a photo of Rabbit, one he had never seen. The two of them together, the Christmas before Rabbit deployed. Young and happy and whole. "Keep it," Rosa said. "Remember him the way he was, not the way he died." That night, in a hotel in Virginia, Jack Sullivan finally broke down completely. The Parkinson's, the exhaustion, the weight of 50 years, all of it crashed down at once. Danny found him on the bathroom floor, shaking so badly he could not stand. They rushed him to the hospital, where doctors stabilized him and told him what he already knew. "You're dying, Mr. Sullivan. The stress is accelerating your Parkinson's to the point where we can't manage it anymore. You need hospice care. You need to say goodbye to your loved ones. You have weeks, maybe a month." Jack lay in the hospital bed and thought about everything he had accomplished. Hayes exposed. The truth told. 12 families given closure. Rabbit's memory honored. It was enough. It had to be enough. Because Jack Sullivan was out of time. Danny drove him back to Montana, Marcus following. They took it slow, stopping frequently, making sure Jack was comfortable. It took 3 days instead of 1, but they made it. The ranch looked the same as when they had left it. Remote, peaceful, home. Ben was waiting on the porch. He took one look at Jack and knew. "How long?" Doctor said a month, maybe less. "Then we make it count." They set up hospice care in Jack's bedroom, the one he had shared with Margaret. Nurses came twice a day. Medications kept him comfortable. Friends visited. Sarah came and read him news articles about Hayes. The man was essentially under house arrest, hounded by media, abandoned by allies. His memoir deal had been canceled. His foundation shut down. He was dying the same death Jack was, but alone and disgraced. Marcus came and told stories about Catherine Chen, about how she had saved him, about how Jack had carried on her legacy of taking broken veterans and helping them find purpose. Ben came every day, sitting in silence or talking about old times. Vietnam, boot camp, the years teaching at Quantico. The good times before the war had taken pieces of all of them. And Danny came every morning and every evening, reading to Jack, helping him eat, making sure he was never alone. They talked about everything and nothing, about Tommy and Rabbit, about Catherine and Margaret, about the mission they had completed together. One evening, as the sun set over the Bitterroot Mountains for what both of them knew was nearly the last time, Danny asked the question he had been holding back. "Was it worth it? Knowing it's killing you, would you still do it?" Jack's answer came without hesitation. "Every time, because some truths were worth dying for. Some promises had to be kept, no matter the cost. Some Marines deserved to be remembered, even if remembering required sacrifice." Jack Sullivan had made his choice 50 years ago when he held Rabbit in his arms and promised to tell the truth. He had spent half a century keeping that promise. Now finally he could rest. The ranch settled into quiet as night fell over Montana. Inside, an old Marine lay dying, surrounded by brothers. Outside, the mountain stood eternal under a sky full of stars. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead inhabit, Rabbit and Tommy and the 12 Marines and Catherine Chen and all the others who had gone before were waiting to welcome Jack home. The mission was complete. The truth had been told. And that, in the end, was enough. Jack Sullivan woke to find he could not move his left hand. The Parkinsons had been stealing pieces of him for months. But this was different. This was complete. His fingers would not respond, would not close, would not do anything except lie there like dead weight attached to his wrist. The hospice nurse, a kind woman named Helen who had seen 100 men die and never stopped caring, checked his vitals with professional efficiency. She did not tell him it would get better. That was one thing Jack appreciated about her. She did not lie. This is the progression we talked about, Mr. Sullivan. The disease is moving faster now. We'll adjust your medication to keep you comfortable. How long? Helen met his eyes. Days, maybe a week. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've had longer than I deserved. After she left, Jack lay in the bed he had shared with Margaret and thought about time. How you never had enough of it when it mattered, and too much of it when you were waiting to die. He had been given 66 years. Rabbit got 20. Those 12 Marines got even less. Who was he to complain about days versus weeks? Danny appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, looking like he had not slept. The young man had barely left Jack's side for the past week, sleeping in the guest room, helping with everything Jack could no longer do himself. It was a role reversal neither of them had planned, but both accepted. Morning, Danny said. Helen says you're awake. Barely. My hand's gone. Left one. Danny set the coffee down and examined Jack's hand with the careful touch of someone who had treated wounded soldiers. He pressed the palm, flexed the fingers, checked for response. Nothing. Can you feel this? Jack shook his head. It's just there, dead weight. I'll tell Helen. She'll adjust your treatment. Danny, Jack's voice was quiet. We need to talk about after. After what? After I'm gone. The ranch, my things, what happens next. Jack, you don't need to worry about that right now. Yes, I do. Because in a few days I won't be able to talk at all, and there are things that need to be said. Danny pulled up a chair, the same chair where Margaret used to sit when Jack was sick with the flu or recovering from surgery. The chair where she had read to him, talked to him, loved him through everything life threw their way. Okay, Danny said, I'm listening. The ranch goes to you. Ben has the paperwork. It's all legal. The house, the land, the shooting range, all of it. Jack, I can't accept that. You already have. I put it in my will 3 weeks ago. You're the only family I have left. Kevin won't even return my calls. You've earned this place. Use it. Teach others. Keep the legacy going. Danny's eyes were wet. What legacy? I'm just a broken veteran trying to figure out how to live again. You're a shooter, a warrior, a teacher. You're everything I needed you to be and more. Catherine would be proud of what you've become. I'm proud of what you've become. The words broke something in Danny. He put his head down on the edge of the bed and cried, shoulders shaking, making sounds he had probably been holding in since Afghanistan. Jack wanted to put his good hand on the young man's head, offer comfort, but he could not reach. So he just spoke instead. Tommy would want you to keep living, Jack said. He'd want you to use what you learned to help others. That's how you honor the dead, not by dying with them, but by living for them. Danny looked up, face wet. How do you do it? How do you carry it for 50 years and not break? Who says I didn't break? I broke 1,000 times, but each time I put myself back together. Sometimes with Margaret's help, sometimes with whiskey, sometimes with pure stubbornness. You find a way because the alternative is giving up, and giving up dishonors everyone who believed in you. Is that what you're doing now? Giving up? Number 1, I'm finishing. There's a difference. My mission is complete. 12 families have answers. Hayes is exposed. The truth is told. I can die knowing I kept my promise to Rabbit. That's not giving up. That's mission accomplished. They sat in silence as morning light filled the bedroom. Outside, Montana was waking up to another perfect day. Inside, a man was preparing to say goodbye to the world. Ben Morrison arrived around noon, carrying a folder thick with documents. He had been handling Jack's affairs for the past month, making sure everything was in order, ensuring no loose ends. Lawyer confirmed everything, Ben said, settling into the chair Danny had vacated. Ranch transfers clean to Danny. Your military benefits go to Kevin, even though he doesn't deserve them. The shooting competition you won in 1992, that trophy goes to Marcus. Said you wanted him to have it. Jack nodded. He had won that competition 6 months after Margaret died, shooting through grief and emptiness, proving to himself he could still hit a target even when nothing else in life made sense. Marcus would understand what that trophy meant. And the rifle, Ben asked, the M40 from Vietnam? That's complicated, Jack said. His voice was getting weaker, each word requiring effort. It belongs in a museum. But not yet. I want Danny to use it first. Want him to compete with it. Win something. Let Rabbit's rifle fire one more perfect shot. Then it can retire. Ben made notes. I'll make sure it happens. There was more business to discuss. bank accounts, insurance policies, the letter Jack had written to be read at his funeral. Ben handled it all with the quiet efficiency of a man who had done this before, who knew that dying required paperwork just like living did. When they finished, Ben set the folder aside and just looked at his friend. 50 years, he said. 50 years we've known each other. Hugh City, 1968, Jack replied. You pulled me out of that burning Humvee. You'd have done the same for me. Never got the chance. You were too good at not getting hit. Ben laughed, but it was edged with grief. We had some times, didn't we? Good and bad. Mostly good. The bad parts just seemed bigger because they hurt more. You think we'll see each other again? After? Jack had spent a lifetime around death and had never settled on an answer to that question. But lying in bed with days to live, he found himself believing in something more. Yeah, he said, I think we will. And Margaret's going to be pissed I took so long to get there. She'll forgive you. She always did. Ben stayed for another hour talking about nothing and everything. Old missions, mutual friends long dead, the time they got drunk in Sigan and woke up in a fishing village with no memory of how they got there. The good times before the war taught them what loss really meant. When Ben finally left, he paused at the door. It was an honor, Jack. Serving with you, being your friend, all of it. Honor was mine, brother. They did not say goodbye. That word had too much finality. Instead, Ben just nodded and walked out. And Jack knew that was the last time he would see his oldest friend vertical. Sarah came that evening bringing flowers and news. She looked exhausted, running on coffee and determination. But her eyes were alive in a way they had not been before the story broke. Hayes had a stroke, she said, settling into the visitor's chair. 3 days ago. He's in the hospital now. Doctors say it's bad. He might not make it. Jack felt nothing at the news. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow recognition that Hayes was dying the same way everyone did, alone and scared and facing judgment. How do you feel about it? Jack asked. Honestly? Sad. He's still my grandfather. I remember him teaching me to ride a bike, taking me to baseball games. Those memories don't disappear just because I know what he did. You can grieve the man he could have been while condemning the man he was. Is that what you do with Rabbit? Grieve who he could have been? Every day. Rabbit would have been a teacher, would have married Rosa, would have had kids and grandkids and a life. Hayes took all of that from him, but I still remember him laughing, joking, being young. The grief and the anger can exist together. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Jack something, a video that had gone viral, approaching 10 million views. It was footage from the shooting competition, the moment they had exposed Hayes. But someone had edited it, added context, included interviews with the families of the 12 Marines. It was powerful, devastating, undeniable. People are calling it the most important piece of military accountability journalism in a decade, Sarah said. I've been offered book deals, documentary contracts, speaking tours. This story changed my career. Are you going to take them? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me just wants to forget any of this happened and go back to writing about local politics. What would your mother say? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Her mother, Hayes' daughter, had not spoken to her since the exposure. The family rift was total and probably permanent. She'd probably say I destroyed everything for a story, that I chose strangers over family. And what do you say? I say I chose truth over lies. And if that makes me a bad granddaughter, then I'll live with it. Jack smiled despite the exhaustion pulling at him. You're going to be fine, Sarah. Better than fine. You're going to tell us stories that matter. That's all any of us can hope for. What about you? Do you think you mattered? 12 families have answers they didn't have before. Rabbit's memory is honored. Hayes can't hurt anyone else. Yeah, I think I mattered. Sarah leaned forward and kissed his forehead. Thank you for everything. For being brave when I wasn't. For showing me what integrity looks like. After she left, Jack lay in the darkening room and thought about legacy. What you left behind. Who remembered you. Whether you had lived a life worth living. He had been a Marine, a husband, a father, though not a very good one, a teacher, a friend, and finally a man who kept a promise that took 50 years to fulfill. It was not a perfect life, but it was his. Marcus arrived the next morning with news that made Jack struggle to sit up despite the pain. They found something, Marcus said. In Hayes' files, letters between him and a defense contractor. Payments made, favors exchanged. The deal he made in the war was just the beginning. He's been selling access and influence for decades. That's beyond what we exposed. Way beyond. The FBI is involved now. Financial crimes, corruption. This goes deep, Jack. You didn't just expose a war crime. You cracked open a whole criminal enterprise. Jack settled back against the pillows, trying to process. All those years, Hayes had been profiting from the deaths of 12 Marines. Building a career, getting rich, all on top of Bones. The families need to know, Jack said. They deserve to know the full scope of what was taken from them. Sarah's working on it. She's coordinating with investigators. By the time this is over, Hayes' entire life will be exposed as a fraud. Good, that's good. Marcus moved closer, his prosthetic leg making its characteristic soft click with each step. Sir, I need to tell you something. About Catherine. About your mother, Danny. Danny had been in the next room, but he appeared in the doorway at the mention of his mother's name. What about her? Danny asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable. After Catherine died, I went through her things. She had left some items for me. One was a letter. She asked me not to open it until the time was right. I think that time is now. He pulled out an envelope, worn and creased from being carried. The handwriting on the front was feminine but strong. To be opened when Jack Sullivan needs to hear this. Marcus handed it to Danny. You should read it to him. Danny took the letter carefully, like it might disintegrate. He opened it, unfolded the single page, and began to read in a voice that shook. Jack, if you're hearing this, it means I'm gone and you're probably not far behind. I'm writing this because there are things I never told you, things I should have said when we taught together at Quantico, but pride and protocol kept me quiet. You saved my life once. 1993, that training accident when the target system malfunctioned. You saw it before I did, pushed me out of the way, took the impact yourself, cracked 3 ribs. You told everyone you slipped. But I knew, I've always known. You never asked for gratitude, never mentioned it again. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. A man who does the right thing and expects nothing in return. I'm writing this because, and I suspect you're going to spend your final days thinking you didn't do enough, that you failed Rabbit, that you failed those 12 Marines, that you waited too long to expose Hayes. You're wrong. You spent 50 years teaching Marines to be better shooters, better warriors, better men. You taught hundreds of us. We went on to teach thousands more. Your legacy isn't one battle or one betrayal. It's every sniper you trained who made the shot when it mattered. It's every life saved by someone you taught. And Jack, you taught my son. You gave Danny purpose when he had none. You showed him that broken things can be whole again. That's worth more than any medal or commendation. Don't die thinking you failed. Die knowing you succeeded in the ways that actually matter. Semper Fi, Catherine Chen. The room was silent when Danny finished reading. Both men had tears on their faces, unashamed and unchecked. She knew, Jack whispered. Somehow she knew. My mother knew everything, Danny said. She just waited for the right time to tell you. Jack closed his eyes, feeling something settle in his chest. Some weight he had been carrying for so long, he had forgotten it was there. Catherine Chen had been his peer, his equal, someone who understood what it meant to carry the responsibility of teaching others to kill. And she had seen him, really seen him, not his failures, but his worth. Tell Marcus, thank you, Jack said, for knowing when to open that letter. You can tell him yourself. Marcus was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking like he was barely holding it together. Jack held out his good hand, and Marcus took it. Catherine saved me twice, Marcus said. Once when she taught me to shoot again after I lost my leg, and again just now giving me the wisdom to know when you needed to hear her words. I'm glad I could repay a small part of what she gave me. You're a good man, Marcus Webb. Catherine was right to believe in you. She believed in all of us. That's why we're here. The days blurred together after that. Jack slept more than he was awake. The morphine kept the pain manageable, but made everything feel distant, like he was watching his own life through fog. Visitors came and went, veterans he had taught, some he barely remembered, but who remembered him. They sat by his bed and told him stories about missions he had prepared them for, lives he had saved through his training. One afternoon, a man in his 50s arrived, wearing a Marine Corps jacket despite the Montana heat. His name was Rodriguez, Carlos Rodriguez, Rabbit's younger brother. I was 5 when Mike died, Carlos said, sitting in the chair that had seen so many visitors. I barely remember him. But my mother never forgot, never stopped talking about him. When she died last year, she made me promise to find you if I could, to thank you for keeping his memory alive. Jack's voice was barely a whisper now. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. My mother said the same thing you're saying now, that she was sorry. Sorry she couldn't protect him, couldn't keep him from going to war. But here's what she also said. She said Mike loved being a Marine, loved what you taught him. In his letters home he wrote about you, about how you made him feel like he could do anything, how you gave him confidence. Jack had not known that. In 50 years, he had never known that Rabbit talked about him in letters home. He wrote that? Really? Carlos pulled out his phone and showed Jack a photo, a letter yellowed with age in Rabbit's handwriting. There's this sergeant named Sullivan. We call him Sully. He's the best shot I've ever seen, maybe the best in the whole Corps. But more than that, he makes me believe I can be that good too. He doesn't just teach us to shoot. He teaches us to be warriors, to be men. If I make it home, I want to be a teacher like him. Want to make kids believe in themselves the same way he makes me believe. Jack read the words through tears that would not stop falling. All these years he had thought Rabbit died cursing him, hating him for not taking the shot that could have saved him. But Rabbit had believed in him, had wanted to be like him. Thank you, Jack managed. Thank you for showing me this. My mother wanted you to know that Mike's death wasn't your fault, that you gave him something valuable in the time you had together. That matters, Mr. Sullivan. That matters more than how he died. After Carlos left, Jack lay in bed and felt something shift. The guilt that had been his companion for 50 years was still there, but it felt different now. Lighter, like maybe, just maybe, he could forgive himself. That night, Jack woke to find Kevin sitting beside his bed. His son looked older than Jack remembered. 42 now, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes. They had not spoken in 10 years, had not been in the same room for longer than that. But Kevin was here now, in the Montana darkness, holding his father's hand. Hey, Dad. Kevin. Jack's voice was so weak it was barely sound. You came. Sarah called me. Told me what you did. Exposing Hayes. Fighting for the truth. She said I needed to know who you really were before it was too late. I'm sorry, Jack said. Sorry I wasn't a better father. Sorry I chose the Corps over you so many times. Kevin shook his head. I was angry about the war, about you defending it when I thought it was wrong. But I realize now that you weren't defending the war. You were defending the men who fought it. There's a difference. I should have explained that better, and I should have listened better. We both screwed up, Dad, but I'm here now. That's what matters. They talked through the night about Margaret, who had tried so hard to bridge the gap between them, about the years Kevin spent angry and distant, about the grandchildren Jack had never met but wanted desperately to know, about forgiveness and second chances and time running out. When dawn broke over the Bitterroot Mountains, Kevin was still there, holding his father's hand. I love you, Dad. I should have said it sooner. Should have said it 1,000 times. But I'm saying it now. Love you too, son. Always have. Kevin stayed for 2 days, sleeping in a chair, helping Danny and the nurses care for Jack. He called his wife and kids, put them on speakerphone so Jack could hear their voices. His grandchildren, 12 and 14, asked him questions about being a Marine, about war, about what it meant to serve. Jack answered as best he could, his voice fading but his mind still clear. He told them about honor and duty and sacrifice, about the men who did not make it home, about how you could hate war and still love the warriors who fought it. When Kevin finally had to leave, had to get back to Seattle and his job and his life, he leaned down and kissed his father's forehead. Thank you, he said, for everything, for teaching me even when I didn't want to learn, for being the kind of man worth admiring, even when I was too stubborn to admit it. Be good to your family, Jack whispered. Don't make my mistakes. I won't, I promise. After Kevin left, Jack slept for nearly a full day. When he woke, he knew the end was close. His body was shutting down, piece by piece. The doctor said maybe another day, maybe 2. Danny was there when Jack opened his eyes. Hey, the young man said softly. You're awake. Is everyone here? Ben's on his way. Marcus is in the living room. Sarah's driving up from Helena. She'll be here in an hour. Good. That's good. I need to tell you all something. While I still can. An hour later, they were all gathered in Jack's bedroom. Ben and Marcus standing by the window. Sarah in the visitor chair. Danny sitting on the edge of the bed. The people who had become his family in these final months. Jack spoke slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, each word an effort. I'm going to die soon, we all know it. But before I do, I need you to understand what you've given me. Danny, you gave me purpose, a reason to fight. You reminded me what it means to be a teacher, a mentor. You're going to do great things with this ranch. I know it. Danny nodded, unable to speak. Marcus, you showed me that Catherine's legacy lives on, that the Marines she trained carry her forward. Keep teaching. Keep helping broken veterans find their way back. That's worth more than any medal. Yes, sir, Marcus managed. Ben, you've been my brother for 50 years. You've saved my life more times than I can count. Take care of these folks, which I'm gone. Make sure they don't do anything stupid. Ben smiled through tears. I'll try, but they're stubborn, like someone else I know. Sarah, you had the courage to choose truth over family. That's the hardest thing a person can do. You're going to tell important stories. Don't let anyone silence you. The world needs journalists who care more about truth than comfort. I won't let you down, Sarah promised. Jack took a shaking breath. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of being forgotten, of Rabbit being forgotten, of those 12 Marines being forgotten. But I don't think that's going to happen now because of all of you. You'll remember, you'll make sure others remember. That's all any of us can ask for. They stayed with him through the afternoon and into the evening, telling stories, sharing memories, laughing at the good times and crying about the hard ones. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, but every time he woke, they were there. As night fell, Jack's breathing changed, shallower, more labored. The nurse checked his vitals and gave Danny a look that said it would not be long now. Should we call anyone? Danny asked. Jack shook his head slightly. Everyone who needs to be here is here. The room settled into quiet. Just the sound of Jack's breathing and the soft hum of medical equipment. Outside, a Montana storm was building, thunder rolling across the mountains like distant artillery. Jack's eyes closed, his breathing slowed, and in his mind he was 23 again, lying in a hide-on hill, 881, with Rabbit beside him making jokes about the girl he was going to marry. The target was in his scope. The shot was perfect. And this time he would take it. This time he would save them all. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled, and Jack Sullivan let go. Danny felt it the moment Jack died. The way the old man's hand, which had been gripping his, went slack. The way his breathing simply stopped. No gasping, no struggle, just an ending as natural as sleep. He's gone, Danny said softly. Ben moved forward, checked for a pulse he knew would not be there. Marcus bowed his head. Sarah cried quietly in her chair. They sat with him for a long time, no one wanting to be the first to leave, to break the spell, to make it real. Outside, the storm broke, rain hammering against the windows, lightning illuminating the room in brief flashes. Eventually, Ben stood. I'll call the funeral home. Not yet, Danny said. Let's just sit with him a little longer. He deserves that. So they sat through the storm, 4 people who had been strangers months ago, but were now bound together by shared mission and shared grief. They told Jack stories even though he could not hear them. Stories about the lives he had touched, the people he had saved, the legacy he was leaving behind. When the rain finally stopped and the sky began to clear, Danny stood and walked to the window. The Bitterroot Mountains were sharp against the night sky, eternal and unchanging. He kept his promise, Danny said. He finished the mission. Rabbit can rest now. They all can, Marcus agreed. The 12 Marines, Crawford, Catherine, all of them. Jack made sure of it. The funeral was held on a clear Montana morning 4 days later. Over 300 people attended. Marines Jack had trained, veterans whose lives he had touched, families of the men who died on Hill 881, reporters covering the story, strangers who had been moved by what Jack had done. The Marine Corps sent a color guard, an honor guard, a bugler who played taps with such precision and feeling that there was not a dry eye in the crowd. Ben gave the eulogy, his voice steady despite the grief. Jack Sullivan was a Marine, a teacher, a friend, and a warrior. But more than any of that, he was a man who kept his promises. 50 years ago, he promised his friend Rabbit that the truth would be told. It took him half a century, but he kept that promise. In a world where people break promises every day, where convenience matters more than integrity, Jack showed us what it means to be a man of your word. We will not forget him, and we will not let the world forget what he fought for. They buried Jack next to Margaret, on a hillside overlooking the ranch. His headstone was simple. Jack Sullivan, Gunnery Sergeant, USMC, 1958 to 2024. He kept his promise. Danny stayed at the grave long after everyone else had left. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The same sun that had risen over Hill 881. The same sun that would keep rising long after all of them were gone. Thank you, Danny said to the fresh earth. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for showing me how to be whole again. I'll take care of the ranch. I'll teach my others. I'll make sure your legacy continues." The wind picked up, rustling through the pines. And if Danny wanted to believe it was Jack's way of saying he heard, of saying goodbye, well, who was there to tell him otherwise? 3 months later, Danny stood at the Montana State Precision Rifle Championship, the same competition where Jack had exposed Hayes. But this time he was shooting Jack's M40A1, Rabbit's rifle, the rifle that had been silent for 50 years. The final shot was at 1,000 yards. Danny settled behind the rifle, feeling Jack's presence, Catherine's training, Tommy's faith in him, all of it converging in this single moment. The target looked impossibly far. The wind was tricky. The pressure was immense. But Danny knew what to do. Jack had taught him. Catherine had taught him. The Marines who had come before had taught him. One shot, one truth. He took the shot. The bullet flew true, crossing half a mile of Montana sky, finding its mark with perfect precision. X-ring, dead center. The crowd erupted. Danny stood. And for the first time since Tommy died, he felt truly whole. Marcus was there, grinning. "Your mother would be proud." "Jack would be proud," Danny corrected. "They both would." Later at the awards ceremony, Danny did something unexpected. He took the trophy, the prize money, the accolades, and announced the creation of the Sullivan Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping veterans with PTSD through shooting sports, mentorship, and community. The ranch would be its home. Jack's legacy would be its foundation, and every veteran they helped would be a promise kept. Sarah covered the story. Her article went viral, spawning a documentary, a book deal, congressional testimony about the importance of veteran mental health services. The foundation grew, helping hundreds of veterans in its first year, thousands in the second. Hayes died 6 months after Jack, alone in a nursing home, his stroke having left him unable to speak. His obituary mentioned the scandal. His medals revoked, his legacy destroyed. He died the way he had lived, thinking only of himself, and he was buried with no honor guard, no flag, no ceremony. The contrast was not lost on anyone. One man had lived for others and was remembered as a hero. The other had lived for himself and was remembered as a traitor. In the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. Years passed. The foundation grew. Danny trained hundreds of veterans using Jack's methods, Catherine's wisdom, his own hard-won experience. Some of them went on to compete. Some became teachers themselves. All of them found purpose. On the anniversary of Jack's death, Danny would climb the hillside to the grave and sit for a while, talking to the man who had saved him, telling him about the veterans they had helped, the lives they had changed, the legacy that continued to grow. And sometimes when the wind was right and the sun was setting over the Bitterroot Mountains, Danny could swear he heard Jack's voice. "Mission accomplished, Marine. Now keep moving forward." So he did, every day, one shot at a time, because that was how you honored the dead. Not by dying with them, but by living the life they believed you could live. That was Jack Sullivan's final gift, his last shot, his ultimate mission. And it would echo forward through generations of warriors learning to be whole again, learning to aim true, learning that broken things could be repaired with time and patience and the wisdom of those who had walked the path before. The rifle might fall silent, but the lessons never would. That was the legacy. That was the truth. That was enough. 5 years after Jack Sullivan was laid to rest on a Montana hillside, Danny Chen stood in the same spot where Jack had first taught him to shoot. The ranch had changed. What was once one man's private refuge was now the Sullivan Foundation headquarters. The main house had been converted into administrative offices and a residential facility for veterans going through the program. The barn was now a classroom. The shooting range had been expanded to accommodate 30 shooters at once. But the mountains were the same. The Bitterroot Range still rose against the sky, eternal and indifferent to human ambition. The wind still carried the scent of pine and sage, and the targets at 1,000 yards still waited, patient and unforgiving. Danny was 43 now. The gray in his hair had nothing to do with age and everything to do with carrying the weight of other men's trauma. In 5 years, the foundation had served over 2,000 veterans. Some stayed a week, some stayed months. All of them left different than they arrived. The young man approaching across the range was typical of the veterans who found their way here. Late 20s, military bearings still visible despite the civilian clothes. Eyes that had seen too much and couldn't unsee it. He walked with a limp, favoring his right leg, and his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. His name was David Park, Marine Corps Infantry, Afghanistan, 2022. Honorably discharged after an IED, took 3 of his friends and left him with a traumatic brain injury and survivor's guilt so heavy he could barely breathe under its weight. Danny had read his file, had seen the red flags. 2 suicide attempts, substance abuse, family estrangement. The kind of damage that didn't show up on x-rays but killed you just as dead. Park stopped a respectful distance away, waiting to be acknowledged. Military courtesy died hard. "You must be David," Danny said. "Welcome to the Foundation." "Thank you for having me." The young man's voice was rough, like he wasn't used to using it. "My VA counselor said this place might help. I told her I doubted it, but I was willing to try." "Doubt is fine. It's giving up that kills you." Park looked at the shooting range, at the targets set up at various distances. "I haven't touched a rifle since I got out. Can't. Every time I pick one up, I'm back in that convoy, hearing the explosion, seeing my friends die." Danny understood that better than Park knew. "I was the same way. Afghanistan, 2018. Lost my best friend because of a mistake I made. Couldn't shoot for years after. Thought I'd never be able to again." "What changed?" "An old Marine named Jack Sullivan. He taught me that the rifle wasn't the enemy. The guilt was. The fear was. The rifle was just a tool. What mattered was what I did with it." Park looked skeptical, the way they all did at first. "And what did you do with it?" "I learned to shoot again. Not to kill, but to heal, to focus, to find that moment of stillness where nothing else matters except breath and trigger pull and target. That's what we teach here. Not how to be warriors again, how to be whole." They walked the property together, Danny explaining the program. 6 weeks minimum. Some veterans stayed longer if they needed to. The first week was just talking. No rifles, no pressure. Just veterans sitting together, sharing stories, realizing they weren't alone. The second week introduced breathing exercises, meditation, the mental preparation that Jack had taught Danny and Jack had learned from Catherine. The foundation employed 2 psychologists who specialize in PTSD, but the real therapy happened between the veterans themselves. Warriors healing warriors. Week 3 was when they started shooting. Simple at first. 25 yards with a .22 rifle. Nothing threatening. Just getting comfortable with the weight, the sound, the mechanics. Some veterans couldn't do it. They'd pick up the rifle and freeze, or break down, or walk away. That was okay. There was no shame in not being ready. But most of them found something unexpected. They found that the rifle in a safe environment, surrounded by people who understood, wasn't the monster they remembered. It was just steel and wood, just a tool. By week 4, they were shooting at distance, 100 yards, 200, learning windage and elevation, doing the calculations that required focus and pushed out the intrusive thoughts. You couldn't think about explosions when you were calculating bullet drop. You couldn't relive trauma when you were reading wind flags. Week 5 was the breakthrough week. That was when veterans started hitting targets at 500, 600, 700 yards. When they realized they still had the skills, that the war hadn't taken everything, that they could still be excellent at something. Week 6 was about choice. Some veterans decided to compete. The foundation sponsored them, provided equipment, coaching. Some decided to teach, staying on as instructors, giving back what had been given to them. Some just went home, taking with them the knowledge that they could face their demons and win. Danny showed Park the residential building. 20 beds, never enough. They had a waiting list of 6 months. Funding was always tight despite Sarah's articles, despite the occasional corporate donation, despite the speaking fees Danny charged when he could bear to leave the ranch. "This used to be Jack Sullivan's home," Danny explained as they entered what had been Jack's bedroom. "He died here, surrounded by friends, at peace. Now we use it for the veterans who need the most support, the ones who are barely hanging on." Park looked around the room. "Someone died here and you use it to help people live. There's poetry in that." Jack would have liked that. He was all about making meaning from loss. They ended the tour at the range. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of copper and gold. The same light that had illuminated 1,000 sunsets Jack had watched from this exact spot. "Tomorrow we start," Danny said. "No rifles yet. Just talking, getting to know each other, learning to trust again. You okay with that?" Park nodded. His hands were shaking worse now, but he didn't try to hide them. I don't know if this will work, but I'm here. That's something. That's everything. Being here is the hardest part. The rest we'll figure out together. After Park went to settle into his room, Danny stood alone on the range. Marcus found him there, the way Marcus often did when Danny needed company, but didn't want to ask for it. New intake? Marcus asked. Marine, Afghanistan, TBI and Survivor's Guild. Classic presentation. He'll do fine. They always do once they realize we're not here to judge. Marcus was 53 now, still moving on his prosthetic leg like it was part of him, still teaching with the patience Catherine had instilled in him. He had become Danny's second in command, the Foundation's director of instruction. Between them, they had developed a program that had a 92% success rate. 92% of veterans who completed the 6 weeks reported significant reduction in PTSD symptoms. 78% reported they were no longer suicidal. Those numbers meant everything. Each percentage point was a life saved, a family kept whole, a warrior who found a way forward. You think Jack would be proud? Danny asked. Of what we've built here. Marcus didn't hesitate. He'd be proud, but he'd also tell you not to rest on your success. There are thousands more who need help. The mission's never finished. Sounds like something he'd say. It's something he did say to me about a month before he died. He told me the fight doesn't end when you win once. It ends when you can't fight anymore. So we keep fighting. They stood in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Two veterans who had found purpose in helping others find theirs. Two men who carried the legacy of those who came before. The foundation had grown beyond what Danny had imagined, beyond what Jack had dreamed. There were now satellite programs in 3 other states, run by veterans who had gone through the Montana program and wanted to bring it home. There was talk of a national expansion, of federal funding, of making this a model for VEA treatment programs. But Danny resisted the pressure to grow too fast. Jack had taught him that quality mattered more than quantity, that each veteran deserved individual attention, that you couldn't heal trauma on an assembly line. So they stayed small, focused, intimate. 20 veterans at a time, 6-week cycles. Personal attention from instructors who had walked the same dark roads. Ben Morrison arrived the next morning, his truck loaded with supplies. He was 72 now, officially retired from the gun shop, but unable to stay away from the foundation. He donated equipment, volunteered as a range safety officer, and served on the board of directors. Got something for you, Ben said, pulling a long case from the truck bed. Found it at an estate sale. Thought the foundation should have it. Inside the case was a rifle, not just any rifle. An M40A3 Marine Corps sniper rifle with a scope and bipod. The serial number indicated it had been issued in 2008. The wear patterns suggested it had seen combat. Whose was it? Danny asked. Ben handed him a letter that had been taped to the case. It was from a widow explaining that her husband had been a Marine Scout sniper who had committed suicide 3 years after coming home. She had kept his rifle, unable to let it go, but unable to look at it without breaking down. When she heard about the foundation, she thought maybe the rifle could serve a better purpose. She wants us to use it to teach others, Ben said. Wants her husband's rifle to be part of healing instead of part of the pain. Danny held the rifle carefully, feeling the weight of all the stories it carried. Every rifle at the foundation had a history. Some had belonged to Jack, some to Catherine. Some had been donated by families like this widow, looking for meaning in their loss. We'll honor it, Danny said, and we'll honor him. The rifle went into the foundation's armory, joining dozens of others, each one tagged with the name of the Marine or soldier or airman who had carried it, each one a connection to the past and a tool for the future. David Park's first week was difficult. He barely spoke during group sessions. When he did share, it came in fragments. The convoy, the explosion, his friends' names, the guilt that ate at him like acid. Danny recognized the pattern. Park was where Danny had been 5 years ago. Broken, angry, convinced he didn't deserve to heal because better men had died. On the 4th day, Park tried to leave. Danny found him in the parking lot, bags packed, truck loaded. I can't do this, Park said. I thought I could, but I can't. Being around all these other vets, hearing their stories, it just makes mine worse. Danny leaned against the truck. Jack Sullivan told me the same thing when I tried to quit. You know what he said? What? He said running away doesn't make the pain stop. It just means you're alone with it. At least here you've got people who understand. Understanding doesn't fix anything. No, but it makes the weight easier to carry. Park looked at the mountains, at the ranch, at the other veterans visible through the windows. I don't know if I can face it. The guilt, the shame, all of it. You don't have to face it all at once. Just today, just this moment. That's all any of us can do. Park was quiet for a long time. Finally, he started unloading his truck. One day at a time, he said. One day at a time. Week 2 was when Park started to open up. During a group session, he told the full story. The convoy, the IED, how he had been the only one in his vehicle to survive. How he had dragged his friends from the wreckage, knowing they were already dead but unable to stop trying to save them. The other veterans listened without judgment. They had their own versions of the same story, different details, same pain. One of them, a former Army medic named Chen, no relation to Danny, spoke about the soldiers she couldn't save, about how she still heard their voices, asking for their mothers, asking her to make the pain stop. Another, a Navy corpsman named Torres, talked about the Marine he had been treating when a mortar round hit, how he woke up covered in his patient's blood, realizing the Marine had shielded him with his own body. These stories poured out, filling the room with shared trauma and shared understanding, and somehow in the telling, they became lighter. Not gone, never gone, but easier to carry. By week 3, Park was ready to shoot. Danny took him to the range early one morning before the other veterans were up. Just the two of them in the Montana dawn. This was Jack's rifle, Danny said, handing Park the M40A1, the one he used in the war, the one his spotter, a Marine named Rodriguez, died beside. Jack couldn't touch it for 40 years after that. Thought it would bring back too much pain. What changed? He realized the rifle wasn't the problem. The memories were, and the memories were going to be there whether he touched the rifle or not, so he might as well use the rifle for something good. Park took the rifle like it might explode. His hands shook. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. I don't think I can do this. You can. I'll be right here. We'll do it together. They spent an hour just holding the rifle, getting used to the weight, breathing through the panic. When Park's hands shook too badly, they stopped. When the memories became too much, they talked through them. By the end of the hour, Park had loaded one round, had settled behind the rifle, had aimed at a target 50 yards away. You don't have to shoot, Danny said. Just getting this far is progress. But Park wanted to try. His finger found the trigger, his breathing slowed, and he fired. The shot went wide, missing the target completely. But Park didn't care. He had pulled the trigger without falling apart. That was victory enough. They built from there. Day by day, yard by yard. 50 became 100. 100 became 200. Park's hands still shook, but less. The panic still came, but he learned to breathe through it. By week 5, Park was hitting targets at 600 yards. Not consistently, but often enough that he started to believe in himself again. Started to see that the war had taken things from him, but not everything. Not his skill, not his worth. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Park was shooting at 800 yards, a distance that required absolute focus. Danny watched through the spotting scope as Park settled in, controlled his breathing, made his calculations. The shot was perfect. Dead center, X-ring. Park stood up, and there were tears on his face, but he was smiling. I did it, he said. I actually did it. You did, and you'll do it again and again until you believe you're still a shooter. I thought I lost this. Thought the war took it from me. The war took your friends. It took your peace of mind, but it didn't take your skills. Those are still yours. You just had to remember how to use them. That evening, during group session, Park shared his accomplishment. The other veterans applauded. They understood what that shot meant. It meant healing was possible. It meant you could face your demons and win. Sarah visited the foundation regularly, usually every few months. Her career had exploded after the Hayes story. She had won journalism awards, written a best-selling book, become a sought-after speaker on military accountability and veteran issues. But she always came back to Montana, to the foundation, to the people who had become her family. She arrived on a Friday, driving up the dirt road in a sensible sedan that looked out of place among the pickup trucks. Danny met her on the porch, and they hugged like the siblings they had become. How's the book tour? Danny asked. Exhausting. Everyone wants to hear about Hayes, about the scandal, but I'd rather talk about this place, about what you're building here. So talk about it, write about it. The more people know, the more veterans we can help. Sarah pulled out her laptop and spent the afternoon interviewing veterans, taking photos, documenting the program. Her next article would be about healing, not scandal, about hope, not corruption. She interviewed David Park, who was nervous but willing to share his story, about how he had come to the foundation broken and was leaving whole, about how shooting had become therapy, focus had become peace, and community had become family. When the article published 2 weeks later, donations poured in, enough to expand the residential facility, enough to hire 2 more instructors, enough to reduce the waiting list from 6 months to 4. Every dollar helped. Every article mattered. But the real success was measured in simpler terms. Veterans who smiled again, Onion, who called their families, who decided they wanted to live. Marcus found Danny in Jack's old office late one night, going through applications. They had received 37 new requests that week alone. Veterans from across the country, desperate for help, willing to travel to Montana for a chance at healing. "We can't take them all," Marcus said gently. "You know that." Danny did know, but it didn't make the choice easier. Each application was a person. Each person had a family. Each family was praying for a miracle. "We need to expand," Danny said. "Open more locations. Train more instructors. We're turning away people who need us. And if we expand too fast, we lose what makes this place special. Personal attention, individual care. The thing Jack taught us." "I know, but Jack's not here to ask anymore. I have to make these decisions myself." Marcus pulled up a chair. "So let's think it through. What would Jack do?" Danny considered. "Jack would say the mission comes first, helping veterans. But he'd also say you can't help anyone if you burn yourself out. Can't save others if you destroy yourself trying. So we find a balance. We expand carefully, train instructors the right way, make sure every new location maintains our standards. It'll take time, but we do it right." Danny nodded. "That's the answer. Slow growth, sustainable growth, quality over quantity." They worked through the night, developing a 5-year plan. 2 new locations, one in Colorado, one in North Carolina, each staffed by veterans who had gone through the Montana program and wanted to teach, each following the same curriculum, the same philosophy, the same commitment to excellence. It would take years, it would be hard, but it would honor Jack's legacy while expanding his vision. On the first anniversary of Jack's death, Danny held a ceremony at the grave. Over 100 people attended, veterans Jack had trained, veterans the foundation had helped, family members of the 12 Marines who died on Hill 881, Ben and Marcus and Sarah. Even Kevin, Jack's son, who had become a regular visitor and a foundation board member. Danny stood beside the headstone and spoke about legacy, about how Jack had spent 50 years teaching warriors to be better, about how that teaching continued through every veteran the foundation helped, every instructor they trained, every life they saved. "Jack told me once that the fight doesn't end when you win," Danny said. "It ends when you can't fight anymore." Well, Jack can't fight anymore, but we can. We fight for every veteran who walks through our doors. We fight for the ones still struggling to find us. We fight because Jack showed us how. He paused, looking at the gathering. 5 years ago, Jack Sullivan exposed a corruption that had been hidden for 50 years. But that's not his real legacy. His real legacy is standing here today. Every veteran who learned to shoot again. Every warrior who found peace. Every person who decided they wanted to live. That's what Jack built. That's what we continue. The ceremony ended with a 21-gun salute fired by Foundation graduates. The shots echoed across the valley, sharp and final and beautiful. After everyone left, Danny stayed at the grave. He did this every year, spending an hour alone, talking to the man who had saved him. "We helped 48 veterans this year," Danny said to the headstone. 48 people who might not have made it without this place. I think you'd be proud of that number. Marcus says we should expand. Sarah's writing articles that bring in funding. Kevin's helping with the business side. We're building something that'll last. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of sage and earth. "I miss you," Danny continued. "Still think about things you said. Still hear your voice when I'm teaching. I try to do it the way you would. Patient, firm, never giving up on anyone, no matter how broken they seem." He placed his hand on the cold granite. "Thank you for everything, for teaching me, for believing in me, for showing me that broken things can be whole. I'll keep the mission going, I promise." David Park completed the 6-week program and decided to stay. He became an instructor, using his story to help others who were struggling with the same guilt. the same pain. His first student was a Marine who had lost both legs in an IED blast and was convinced his life was over. Park taught the young Marine what Danny had taught him. That loss didn't define you, that you could still be excellent, still be useful, still matter. The Marine learned to shoot from a wheelchair, adapting his position, finding new ways to steady the rifle. When that Marine hit his first target at 500 yards, Park felt something shift inside himself. This was why he was alive. This was his purpose, not to die with his friends, but to live for the ones who came after. The pattern repeated. Veterans helping veterans, warriors healing warriors, each graduate potentially becoming an instructor, each instructor training dozens more, the legacy multiplying, expanding, touching lives in ways Jack Sullivan could never have imagined. By year 7, the foundation operated in 5 states. Over 5,000 veterans had gone through the program. The success rate remained above 90%. Suicide rates among graduates were less than half the national average for veterans. Danny was interviewed by national media, invited to testify before Congress, asked to advise the VA on treatment programs. He did it all, but he never stayed away from Montana long. The ranch was home, the work was here, the mission continued. One afternoon, Danny was teaching a class of new veterans when a truck pulled into the parking lot. An old man got out, moving slowly, leaning on a cane. He was in his 80s, wearing a baseball cap with Marine Corps insignia. Danny recognized him from photos. Carlos Rodriguez, Rabbit's younger brother. They had met once, years ago when Jack was dying. But Carlos looked different now, older, frailer, like he was running out of time. "Mr. Rodriguez," Danny said, walking over, "this is a surprise. Call me Carlos, and I apologize for dropping by unannounced. But I needed to see this place. Needed to see what Jack built. Jack didn't build it alone. This is as much your brother's legacy as anyone's." Carlos looked around the property, at the veterans on the range, at the instructors coaching them, at the targets set up at impossible distances. "Mike would have loved this," Carlos said softly. "He wanted to be a teacher, wanted to help young people believe in themselves. This is what he would have done if he'd lived. Then we're doing it for him, for all of them." They walked the property together, Carlos moving slowly but determined. Danny showed him the memorial wall where the names of fallen warriors were inscribed. Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen, the dead who inspired the living. Rabbit's name was there. Michael Rodriguez, USMC, died Hill 8, 81 South, 1971. His sacrifice will not be forgotten. Carlos stood in front of his brother's name for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for remembering him, for making sure he mattered. He always mattered." Jack made sure of that. Carlos reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is from my mother. She wrote it before she died, asked me to deliver it when the time was right. I think the time is now." Danny opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single page, handwritten in shaky script. "To whoever continues Jack Sullivan's work. My son Mike died in a war that took too many good men. For 50 years, I carried the pain of not knowing why. Not understanding how a boy who believed in heroes could die because of a traitor's greed. Jack Sullivan gave me answers. He gave me peace. He kept a promise to my son that took half a century to fulfill. Now I'm asking you to keep a promise to me. Keep teaching. Keep healing. Keep making sure that warriors know they matter, that their sacrifice means something, that they're not forgotten. Mike wanted to be a teacher. Through this foundation, he is. Thank you for making my son's dream come true, even though he's not here to see it. Rosa Martinez Rodriguez." Danny had to read it twice before he could speak. The handwriting suggested Rosa had written this near the end of her life, with hands that shook from age or emotion or both. "She died 3 years ago," Carlos said. "Cancer, but she lived long enough to know that Mike's death meant something, that Jack had kept his promise. She died at peace." "We'll keep the promise," Danny said. "For her, for Mike, for all of them." Carlos nodded. "I'm 89 years old. I don't have much time left. But I needed to see this before I go. Needed to know that Mike's memory lives on. Now I can die, knowing he's not forgotten." He's not, and he never will be. They parted with a handshake that became a hug. Two men connected by loss, separated by decades, united by the understanding that memory was sacred and promises mattered. That evening, Danny added Rose's letter to the Foundation's archive, alongside Jack's journals, Catherine's training notes, letters from families, photographs of warriors living and dead. All of it preserved, protected, honored. The foundation had become more than a treatment program. It had become a living memorial, a testament to the idea that the dead could inspire the living, that sacrifice could lead to healing, that tragedy could be transformed into purpose. Marcus retired from active teaching at 60, but he stayed involved as an advisor and board member. His replacement was a former Army Ranger named Johnson, who had lost an arm in Syria and learned to shoot left-handed. Johnson brought his own perspective, his own techniques, but he maintained the foundation's core philosophy. Warriors healing warriors. Patience, persistence, purpose. Ben Morrison died peacefully in his sleep at 78. His funeral was attended by hundreds. The foundation flew flags at half-mast for a week. Danny gave the eulogy, talking about a Navy SEAL who became a gun shop owner, who became a guardian of broken veterans, talking about loyalty and friendship and brotherhood that transcended service and branch in time. They scattered Ben's ashes on the ranch, in the mountains he had loved, among the warriors he had served. His memory joined Jack's and Catherine's and all the others who had built the foundation through their sacrifice and service. Sarah's book about the foundation, titled One Shot at a Time, became a bestseller. It told the stories of a dozen veterans who had gone through the program, showing their journeys from broken to whole. The book won awards and generated donations and brought attention to the crisis of veteran suicide and PTSD. But more than that, it brought veterans to Montana, to the foundation, to healing. Danny was 60 when he finally admitted he needed to slow down. The years of carrying others' trauma, of teaching and counseling and fighting for funding, had worn him down. His hair was completely gray, his hands shook sometimes, though not from fear anymore, just age. He promoted David Park to Director of Operations. Park had been with the foundation for 15 years, had taught hundreds of veterans, had become the man his fallen friends would have been proud of. He was ready. Danny stayed on as founder and chairman emeritus, but he stepped back from daily operations. He spent more time in the mountains, more time at Jack's grave, more time remembering the journey that had brought him here. One spring morning, 20 years after Jack's death, Danny stood at the 1,000-yard line, the same spot where Jack had first taught him to shoot, the same distance that had seemed impossible all those years ago. He had Jack's M40A1 with him, Rabbit's rifle, the rifle that had been silent for 40 years and then became a tool of healing. It was retired now, displayed in the Foundation's museum alongside Catherine's rifle and other weapons with stories to tell. But today, Danny had special permission to shoot it one more time. He settled behind the rifle, feeling Jack's presence, feeling Catherine's wisdom, feeling Rabbit's spirit and Tommy's faith and all the ghosts who had made him who he was. The target was 1,000 yards away. The wind was tricky. The shot was impossible for most people. But Danny wasn't most people. He was a shooter, a warrior, a survivor, a teacher. He controlled his breathing, made his calculations, found that space between heartbeats where everything went still, and he took the shot. The bullet flew true, crossing half a mile of Montana sky, finding its mark with the precision that Jack had taught him, that Catherine had perfected, that Rabbit had died believing in. X-ring, perfect center. Danny stood up, and he was crying. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. For the journey, for the teachers, for the warriors who had believed in him when he could not believe in himself. A young veteran approached, one of the newest instructors, a Marine who had completed the program 2 years ago and stayed to teach. She was 28, carrying the same wounds Danny had carried at that age. "That was beautiful," she said. "I've never seen anyone shoot like that. My teacher was the best, and his teacher before him, and hers before her. That's how it works. We pass it on. Will you teach me to shoot like that?" Danny smiled. "If you're willing to learn." They walked back to the range together, instructor and student, warrior and warrior. The cycle continuing, the legacy growing, the mission never ending. Because that was what Jack Sullivan had taught, that the fight didn't end when you won once. It ended when you couldn't fight anymore. And even then, if you had taught others well, the fight continued through them. That evening, Danny sat on the porch of what had been Jack's house. The sun was setting over the Bitterroot Mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The same sunset Jack had watched from this spot 10,000 times. The ranch was quiet, the day's training complete, the veterans in their rooms, processing what they had learned, preparing for tomorrow's challenges. The instructors in their homes, resting before the next cycle began. And Danny sat alone, but not lonely, surrounded by memories and ghosts and the knowledge that he had kept his promise. To Jack, to Tommy, to all the fallen warriors who had believed the living could be better. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Just got word. The VA is adopting our model. National rollout in 2 years, 20 locations across the country, all using the Sullivan Chen Foundation curriculum. You did it, Danny. You changed how America treats its broken warriors. Danny read the message twice. Then he looked up at the mountains, at the ski, at the place where he had scattered Jack's ashes years ago. We did it, he said to the empty air. All of us together. This is your legacy, Jack. This is what you built. The wind picked up, rustling through the pines. And if Danny wanted to believe it was Jack's way of saying he was proud, of saying the mission was accomplished, well, there was no one there to tell him otherwise. 20 veterans would arrive next Monday, 20 broken warriors looking for healing, 20 people who needed someone to believe in them when they could not believe in themselves. Danny would be there, the instructors would be there, the foundation would be there, because that was the promise, that was the mission, that was the legacy. One shot at a time, one veteran at a time, one life saved at a time, until no warrior had to face their demons alone, until no one who had served had to die by their own hand, until every broken thing had a chance to be whole again. That was Jack Sullivan's final gift, his ultimate mission, his lasting shot. And it would echo forward through generations, through thousands of warriors, through a nation learning to care for those who had sacrificed everything in its name. The rifle might fall silent, the warriors might grow old and die, but the lessons would remain. The legacy would continue, the truth would stand. One shot, one truth, one life at a time. That was enough. That was everything. That was the promise kept. The sun set over Montana, and Danny Chen sat on a porch where Jack Sullivan had once sat, watching the same mountains, carrying the same mission, living the same truth. The dead were honored, the living were healing, and somewhere in whatever place warriors go when their battles are done, Jack Sullivan and Rabbit Rodriguez and Tommy Nguyen and Catherine Chen and all the others were watching, and they were proud. Mission accomplished. The fight continued. And that, in the end, was exactly as it should be. The end. Brothers, Jack Sullivan was 76 years old with Parkinson's disease, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his rifle, but he had a promise to keep. 50 years earlier, his spotter Rabbit died in his arms because their lieutenant betrayed them. 12 Marines total, all for one man's glory. Everyone called Jack bitter, paranoid, told him to let it go, but he didn't. One competition, one recording, one shot that exposed everything. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about keeping promises when the whole world tells you to quit. What would you do? Comment below and subscribe for more untold veteran stories.